Not aware of any apologies. I think we're all here. Do we have any declarations of interest this morning? I haven't been made aware of any. Item 4, public forums, petitions, deputations. Also not aware of any this morning. 5, notification of extraordinary or ordinary business, supplementary reports or other. Also not aware of any this morning. So we go straight to the staff report, item 6. Nigel, you might have a couple of comments to make on the item before we move to welcome.
And through you, Mr. Chair, this item is really just a summary of the submissions and the submission process and the key matters that have come up through that. I would just like to draw your attention to a correction to be made on page 5. So it talks in relation to key issue 1 at the bottom of page 5 that the majority of submissions, 54%, did not respond directly to the question. That's actually supposed to be 56%, and you can see that in the pie chart below. So the pie chart was correct, and there's just a typo there. It should be 56 instead of 54. We've got 17 submitters to be heard today, and then we will reconvene next week for the consideration of the submissions. So there's some recommendations there around receiving the submissions, including late submissions, etc., and then moving straight into the hearing part of the day.
Thank you, Rachel. Now I believe we can move A to F. Anybody want to move in that direction or comments? You like that? You'd like to move A to F? A seconder for that. Eric? Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. Okay, that will lead us on to the beginning of the submission process. First up this morning we have Doug Fraser. Doug, would you like to come forward? As you'll be aware, Doug, we've been here before. We've allocated 10 minutes. You might want to have 5 minutes to summarise and 5 minutes per question. You've got a wee bit of flexibility on how you use that. The councillors will have read your submissions, so you're welcome to submit, to summarise your main points, but the floor is yours, Doug.
Thank you, Nicol, and thank you, councillors and staff. It's been a while since I've been here, Nicol, to submit on a long-term plan, so look forward to it. You've obviously prodded me enough for me to come back and talk about this one. So. You probably know me. I'm Doug Fraser, sheep farmer at Round Hill and also a dairy farm at Groper's Bush. So what you're imposing in this plan is going to have a significant effect on my rates bill for next year and on and through the 10-year period. Indeed, I can see my general rates, according to this plan, going up by 112% over the next 10 years. Then it's not insignificant given that I pay over $6,000 worth of rates now on my two properties. So I'll start and make comment about the document. The last time I submitted on a long-term plan, I got a substantial document that had a lot of information in it. I could go into that document and find all the information I'd want on how you were rating me and how those rates were going to be used in your organisation to fund activities. It was quite clear. I think it failed in this document. Now I'm told that you're not allowed to, it's legally not allowed to do what you used to do, but the word on the street is that this document is a lot less substantial than a lot of your peers around the country. So having just two options, I don't feel is the right way of consulting with your rate-paying community. I note in the staff reports that there was no clear indication one way or t'other, and a lot of people avoided making a recommendation to one of the two options, and I did as well, because I believe neither of those options or the other options that you canvassed with your staff in workshops prior to setting the consultative process, none of them I felt very useful. So I just make that comment first. Now, probably the most important thing is to look about where you're going to spend the money. And you say in the document that this increase in rates is to do work that you need to do. And Nicol talks about in his notes about a technology upgrade and the costs imposed by central government on freshwater and climate change. The staff notes indicate there's going to be $3.8 million extra additional rates levied, and $2.35 million of that is on the Essential Freshwater Program, and to quote, business transformation and innovation investment. Now, I'm not sure whether any of those things are specific to the farming community, and indeed, not any of them, they're not activities that the farming community should be funding to the extent that you're asking us to do. Your general rate's going up by 33.7%. Your total operating funding is going up by 27.5%. That sort of increases are unsustainable. So for my two properties, one's going to, the general rate component, not counting my catchment rates and the likes, the general rate component is going up by $440 on one property and $490 on the other. Now that's more, that increase is higher than the majority of urban ratepayers are paying in their total rates. And we have urban representatives coming in, submitting and saying, oh, the percentage has gone up a lot for us. But if the percentage is going up a lot on a small amount, it's still insignificant. And I'm suggesting that you need to re-look at your options. And the options, of course, are to utilise the uniform annual charge. So I suggested that in my submission, and the staff comments back was, and I'll quote, that the decision was consistent, this is to maintain the UAC at $128, I think it is, that this decision was consistent in terms of applying the same percentage movement to the UAGC as the general rate. Now, I don't know whether you councillors have had a look at that, but that's not what has happened. What has happened is that the UAGC has gone from $106.50 to $128.39. That's a 20% increase in rates. But what your staff are telling you and telling me is that the rates have gone up consistently with the increase in the general rates, which is 33.7%. So if you increased by 33.7%, it would be $142.39. But if you used that UAGC to its full extent that you're allowed to, which I'm suggesting you should do to try and even out the burden of this massive rate increase, it should go to $175. And that's only $68 per ratepayer across the total community. So please, just think about it. Why should I be paying a bigger increase on each of my farms as an urban ratepayer is paying on his property total? I'm suggesting that what has been transmitted to the community is deceptive. That's a nice word to say. Now, I don't know whether you've been deceived or you as a council have actually been party to this deception. But the deception is saying that the rate increase is 20%. The rate increase is not 20%, it's 33.7% on the general rates. You haven't increased the targeted rates hardly at all, only by 2%, and you've increased your charges and fees, which again fall on me as a dairy farmer disproportionately, by 70%. You've got it wrong, guys, and you've got to address it. And I'll leave it at that and be quite happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Doug. Well, I'll lead off on just trying to get my head around the 33.7% of, is that your own particular rate? You
No, that's the general rate increase. So you ask your staff, go to the funding impact statement. Oh, I've got a copy of it here. So the general rate component goes from $10.7 million this current year to $14.39 million this 21 next year, and then by 2031 it's $22.8 million. Now, have I got my figures wrong? Because that's what's in the funding impact statement.
Certainly a question we can answer. The annual uniform charge is also part of that, Doug. But,
No, I accept that, Nickel. I accept that, Nickel. But that's.
Jeremy.
But you're only, but the uniform annual charge, you haven't increased by 33.7%. You've told us that it is, but it's actually only gone up by 20%. So that puts a bigger impost on the general rate.
Jeremy.
Yeah, just to clarify that your overall rate increase, if you took all the targets and general rates and that, what percentage?
I didn't work it out.
That's focusing on the general rate. That's what we're indicating, obviously.
That's the major rate increase.
Yeah.
And that's where you'll be taking the extra costs. That's because your targeted rate's only shifted by 2%. And I'm suggesting that your targeted rate should be going up because that is, and your UAGC, because that's the way that you can target the wider community. Because are improving your technology abilities and your innovation around in the council mechanisms, and are addressing climate change and water quality, are they problems that are peculiar to the farming sector? I'm suggesting they're peculiar to the wider community. But the wider community, they're having small rate increases because it's based on capital value. So if you have a $1 million house, I worked it out last night actually, $1 million house in Invercargill, so that's a high class house. That's the people that were on reasonable incomes in Invercargill. They may only be paying $417 in UAGC and general rate that's coming under the new proposal. $417. I'm getting increases of that on each of my farms. So I suppose you can sum it up in this way. The last comment, the last one sentence, Nickel, the last comment in my submission, and I'd like you to focus on it, is only when there's a clear and direct relationship between the services you provide to a ratepayer and the funding of those services by the ratepayer will there be quality decisions made about the type and quality of services provided. So you get that link, and then you won't have just farmers coming in here and berating your rate increases. You will have pressure from the total community. Because somebody at $1 million house paying $417 in general rates, it's to the point of indifference. Happy to finish there, Nickel. Sorry, I've gone over time.
Thank you for submitting this morning, Doug. Okay, next up we have Mrs. Judy Campbell. Welcome, Judy.
E iti he punami. It may be small, but it is very precious. Ko reti taku awa, ko takitimu taku mauna, ko takitimu toku waka, ko mai tahi toku riri, ko rau araha toku marae, no Mossburn toku kāinga, ko Jenny Campbell ahau. I'm especially committed to making Southland more environmentally sustainable, user-friendly for cyclists and walkers, having more native biodiversity, being food resilient, having healthy warm homes, stopping use of coal for thermal heat in both homes and businesses, along with waste reduction and stopping methane gas production. I commend the councillors and staff for all the work they do to ensure their main foci of air, land and water are given the attention they deserve for the overall health of Murihiku, especially as we endeavour to make our province more climate resilient. I am happy to pay my rates to support the work you're endeavouring to do, including any increases. Priorities for Environment Southland include stressing how important it is for the 4 Southland councils to work together collaboratively on climate change. I agree wholeheartedly with your statement. Work to jointly develop and implement Murihiku Southland Regional Climate Change Strategy with other regional partners. I look forward to its implementation as a top priority. Reducing carbon emissions along with reducing methane emissions are also top needs, with that needing to be reflected in all policies. The decisions we are making now are for the next generations, not just for people, but for all other living species as well, with Environment Southland needing to follow that kaupapa and put more stress on that through all actions and policies. It is different now. All decisions and policies need to be science-based. Another priority is building resilience. Recent floods show our area is very vulnerable to becoming isolated, and we need to encourage diversification of crops so we are not so reliant on other areas. Consultation with iwi at every step is essential, as they bring another view of Te Ao and its values. Fresh water, making a difference. I agree with all the actions you propose to continue to implement, including government policies and standards, proposed Southland Water and Land Plan, People, Water and Land Program, Te Mana o Te Tangata, Te Wai, Te Whenua, with its 3 main work streams, as well as an integrated catchment management plan. I stress the urgency of all these actions and expect more resources to be diverted into these areas of work, so more staff can be employed to ensure implementation at the earliest opportunity. Taking our government's climate emergency declaration very seriously and acting much more urgently to reduce carbon emissions must be the top focus for this LTP for Environment Southland. Under the government climate emergency declaration, Environment Southland is a priority to sustainably manage the natural and physical resources in the district to meet the reasonably foreseeable needs of future generations, to safeguard the life-supporting capacity of air, water, soil and ecosystems, and avoid, remedy or mitigate any adverse effects of activities on the environment. It is essential that Environment Southland takes this responsibility seriously and looks at all its possible policies and proposed plans through the climate change lens, meaning Environment Southland needs to be protectors of the natural ecosystems under their jurisdiction. Young people, as future generations, are looking to all of us as adults to take climate change seriously and not just look to our own wants and needs, often based on the economy and money as a priority. Young people expect the LPTP to focus on their interests and their livelihoods which are at stake, to lead the way to maintain the life-supporting capacity of our ecosystems and to drastically reduce the damage of our current practices on the environment. Environment Southland must act consistently with these moral and ethical values and understanding in formulating this plan. Our native ecosystems have been pushed to breaking point by human activity, climate change, introduced pests, pollution and deforestation. Nature does have the ability to rebound, and ES needs to include actions which ensures nature does get the chance to do that very quickly. Rivers, lakes, landscapes, coastlines are unique ecosystems, all contributing to Murihiku's well-being and potential. It is essential that there is a focus on mapping and protecting significant natural areas, and adequate funding sources need to be included in the LTP in order for these to be carried out. Funding of pest and weed control needs to be clearly stated in the LTP. This funding will continue to ensure successful efforts on public and private land alongside the help you're getting from community groups, regional council and central government initiatives. A continuation of subsidies is provided for people already by Environment Southland. These to be available for people to move off fossil fuels for heating both homes and businesses, in particular coal across Murihiku. This subsidy needs to now be available for small country towns where air pollution is caused by people still burning coal and creating air quality pollution above the World Health Organization standards. Not only is this a major contributor to climate change, carbon emissions, but it also causes severe air pollution affecting the health of Murihiku people and increasing hospital admissions, particularly in winter, and especially for vulnerable young people. Encouraging people to grow their own vegetables and fruit alongside community gardens is another way of increasing local food production, cutting down emissions from food miles and increasing local food resilience. I support the proposed investment to improve Three Waters infrastructure, as this will contribute towards maintaining and enhancing freshwater quality and support the preferred option for drinking water. I encourage Environment Southland to focus on ensuring more water flows down the Waiau River so its Māori health and habitats are restored to a living ecosystem. At present, so little water is flowing down it as a result of Meridian's policy of taking maximum water from the river to drive more profit from themselves. This river used to be the second biggest river by volume in Aotearoa. Environment Southland needs to ensure the life of the river is returned to at least a living entity. We also need to have subsidies or low interest loans for rainwater tanks, educate the public on not putting pollutants such as water from car washing, straws and plastic down stormwater drains, and to support current efforts by a voluntary group being made to improve the state of the water quality of the Invercargill estuary, increasing compliance and enforcement. Plans and bylaws need to be made more effective by being properly enforced. Adequate funding for compliance monitoring and enforcement functions must be a priority in the long-term plan, as it is critical work. Waste reduction. While carbon dioxide is the biggest driver of long-term climate change, methane is far more potent in the shorter term, warming the atmosphere more than 85 times as much as the same amount of carbon dioxide does over a 20-year period. For this reason, every effort must be made to reduce methane production, particularly in the farming sector. I affirm ES for making priorities, reducing its environmental footprint and addressing climate change. Environment Southland has been given a strong mandate to focus on those commitments in this long-term plan round. No te roro, ngāti te roro, or te iwi. From your food basket to my food basket, there's sufficient for everyone. Waka eki noa, we're all in this water together. And I really admire what you did last month. Tō tātou haerenga, our journey. Tough decisions, strong future. I leave it to you.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll take a couple of quick questions. Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Jenny, for coming in for your submission. Just want to ask a point. Right at the top, priorities for ES include, and right at the very top is how you stress it's important for the four Southland councils to work together collaboratively on climate change. Do you think you obviously think that's the best way to go as opposed to the four councils working independently? Could you just sort of clarify or give us any further ideas from that?
To start with, it's a less costly process, I would imagine. And you have all the councils have different expertise in different areas. I think you need to hear from each other and how you're going to do the overall well-being of Murihiku as a whole, as opposed to having separate entities. So I strongly recommend that. And I think it would be to your advantage, obviously, to have the support of the other councils as well to do that. It's a huge task. You're all being asked to do. I appreciate it. But if we don't start now or yesterday, we'll never make a difference, which is what we've been called to do.
Thank you, Jenny, and we have run out of time. I was remiss in actually saying you sort of had the 10 minutes, but thank you very much for submitting today, and obviously we consider all these submissions at the deliberations. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I'll keep reiterating because people aren't always in the room. Next up is Healthy Families Invercargill. You've got 10 minutes. You may want to use 5 to summarise your submission and have questions, but you've got a wee bit of flexibility there. The councillors will have read your written submission, so the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, Environment Southland, Chairman, councillors and staff. Ko Stella O'Connor, Pukurunga, no Mirahiku Aho. Good morning, I'm Stella O'Connor and yes, I'm from Healthy Families Invercargill, but today I'm representing the Mirahiku Kai Collective. And thank you very much for this opportunity to be heard. It's great to be here. So the Mirahiku Kai Collective is made up of a number of community groups who have formed around the common vision of enabling Southlanders to have the capability to produce and access good food. So we are recently formed and we have various, as well as those organisations, we've got some ICC staff that come along to our meetings from Parks and Recreation team and WasteNet as well, contributing to our collective. We have submitted to all the long-term plans for ICC, SDC and Gore District Council. So firstly, I just want to commend Environment Southland for identifying in the long-term plan consultation community resilience as a big issue and for taking an approach to come together as a community so that we are all part of the solution for good outcomes now and in the future. So well done. I also want to commend Environment Southland for establishing an in-house community garden. It was obviously established for wellbeing for your staff, but you've gone the next step and you're fostering a relationship with the local kohanga reo, which is excellent. The Southland territorial authorities have repeatedly shown a commitment to building a strong and cohesive, vibrant communities. And we all know that you all value the importance of community wellbeing. So while there are parts of our community that are thriving, there are also pockets where the opposite is a reality. And feedback from these communities and families show that one of the major struggles is access to quality and nutritious food. This has been exacerbated by the onset of COVID-19 pandemic. I'm just going to ask you to remember back to last year when we had the onset of COVID-19. It would have been a point in time where everyone in this room would have experienced a real panicked feeling that you might not be able to feed your family. This feeling may have been fleeting for you, but for some in our community and the families we talk to, this is a reality most days. The pandemic exposed inequalities, but it also revealed solutions. And we know that there are more shocks and crises coming, and we have a chance to build a more secure, sustainable, resilient local food system, one that is healthier and supports people more fairly. So we are here to see the kurio about how together we can all support a regenerative local food system that is prepared in times of natural disasters, climate change, supports self-sustainability, promotes and supports local food production, and the need to provide adequately for our communities. We've asked all the Southland councils to come on board and help lead the progress in this space and help co-design and adopt a Murihiku Food Resilience Strategic Plan. This could be something that could be used across departments and territorial authorities and councils to help inform existing and future work, programs and activities relating to food security and food sovereignty. There are various examples that we've tabled that the council can support and promote along the community to reduce barriers so that our local food producers are supported. More of our community are growing their own produce and our vulnerable have access to good food. So imagine by 2030, Southland has a booming local food system that provides good food to businesses, organisations, communities and individuals. In order for Southland to have a booming local food system by 2030, we need to make a plan. So now it's time to commit and include food resilience while looking at your long-term planning so that our region will have a thriving social, economic and physical environments that provide healthy, affordable and locally grown food for all people. So we're asking Environment Southland to attend and support the Community Food Resilient Workshop to help identify opportunities and potentially co-design a regional action plan to strengthen the region's local food systems. So from there, we hope your staff will identify and implement actions to progress that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Robert?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm not supposed to say how much I admire your kaupapa, so I won't. But my question is, how far advanced, how well prepared do you feel we are now with food resilience? I mean, I hear what you're saying about the proposals and stuff. Where do you think we're at now? What's your feeling for that?
I think what the pandemic showed is that we have a good ability to quickly connect with our community, but we could do that better if we come together more often and know who's who in the food system. And this is really what we're proposing, a collective approach and coordinated approach.
Yeah, thank you. I just wonder if there's a couple of easy things that people could do as sort of a first step on that road to more resilience. Like what could a family do or what could a community do that's an easy tick?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a very complex, the food system is very complex. So not one solution will be an answer. There's got to be multiple strategies from multiple organisations. But like you're saying, whānau could be producing their own food. And part of that solution that Environment Southland and the other councils could play would be to have how do you grow in the Southland conditions on your communications platforms, that it's so that, because the conditions here are quite different to the conditions further up north, you know, how to compost locally and things like that. So we could be all supporting our whānau together. That's just an example, that's my example, and I'm not here with the answers. I want you guys to come up with the solutions.
Thank you for coming in and submitting this morning. We will consider all submissions at the due time, but great to have you this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
We now have Water Safety New Zealand and Neil Lindis, by Zoom or by what's?
That's coming in by Zoom, and he's been sent the link, and he's not sitting in the waiting room at the moment, so he might be clearly sorry.
So, here's the next. Right.
And the next one's by Erin, and I'll ask him to come in if he wants to talk.
Okay.
Adjourn for a minute.
We need to line up both of those Zoom calls.
We'll call an adjournment for a few minutes until we can find our Zoom people.
One with Aaron on Zoom.
Yes.
Okay.
Still understand. She's not here, but she's not here.
Especially them too.
So do we have Neil waiting or?
Roy Thompson, the mama from.
It's Roy Thompson who's for,
No, it's not.
so we jump to 16 now.
Yeah, that's 16.
Okay, we will resume the meeting. I understand, Roy, you're in the waiting room there. Would you like to present? You have 10 minutes. So you can.
Great, thank you, Nicol. So yes, my name's Roy Thompson. I'm a trustee of the Mamaku Point Conservation Reserve. Just like to thank you all for a few minutes of your time today. I only plan on speaking for about 3 minutes, just to quickly run through the history of the reserve and the trust that operates the reserve, our objectives, our current areas of focus, and how potentially the Environment Southland might support us. So very quickly, the land itself has been a privately owned reserve since 2000, and it's been protected by a predator-proof fence since 2005. The land is leased to a charitable trust on a 30-year lease at $1 a year, and the landowner is in the process, which is myself and my wife, through our trust, we're in the process of putting in place a QE2 covenant over the entire reserve area. We already have one small QE2 covenant in place, and now just moving to do the whole reserve. The trustees, in addition to myself, we have Philip Smith, who's a Rakiura Kaumatua, and Professor Phil Seddon, who is Professor of Zoology at Otago University. For funding, at the moment, the running costs of the reserve are about $150,000 a year, and we currently fund that through roughly about 1/3 from grants and 2/3 from donations. We have received some small grant funding from Environment Southland before for some native planting restoration. The objectives of the trust that operates the reserve, we have 3 main objectives. Number 1 is to enhance the biodiversity of the reserve over time. 2, to use it as a means of environmental education. It has an old school camp on it, and that camp was very popular in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but was closed down when it was privately purchased in 2000. We've reopened it since 2017. We've now got around 10 schools coming back regularly. And sustainability. And sustainability in this context means both financial and environmental sustainability. Most importantly, for the trustees, this is not a zoo. This is a scientific reserve. It's all about protecting and enhancing the biodiversity within the reserve and educating particularly our young people. Our current focus, we're in the process of the ecological restoration of some 18 hectares of former farmland, planting out 15,000 natives there. We've been asked by the Yellow-Eyed Penguin Trust to establish a rehab centre for those populations around Rakiura, which we hope to have up and running by the end of this year. Our ongoing pest control, of course, we have a network of about 600 bait stations and 150 traps within the reserve, which is a big exercise in itself. We're looking to translocate saddleback into the reserve at the moment, and also working with DOC and iwi around Tuatara translocation, which would be pretty exciting. We're just in the process of completing a new 24-person bunkhouse in the school camp, and we'd like to, at some stage in the next year or so, connect the school camp to the town sewer and get off the current septic system. So that's what we're focused, who we are, and what we're focused on. In terms of potential support from Environment Southland, I mean, we would love any support through the Jobs for Nature funding that you've received to assist with a translocation officer and a junior biosecurity ranger. And perhaps even if we could be so bold, some help to connect into the town sewer supply would be an outstanding outcome. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a brief overview of what we're doing, what we're involved in.
Thank you, Ray. Have any questions for Ray? Eric.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm just trying to get my head around your exact location. I'm kind of presuming this was the old Derek Turnbull farm that passed to Dancing Star, and am I right on that?
That's quite right, yes. So it's the whole peninsula that runs between Horseshoe Bay and Lee Bay.
Yeah, okay. And what size of a committee do you have and the buy-in from the local community on this?
Well, we do, I think at the moment we enjoy good buy-in from the community. We've taken a great deal of care to build and maintain our social licence, which I would say perhaps was something that the previous owners, who were a US foundation, didn't really have. So for us, part of the reason for actually buying the reserve was to get locals back onto that property. They had previously been excluded, and to open up the school camp, which, as I mentioned, had been closed down. So, as I say, Philip Smith, who's a senior kamatua on the island, is one of our trustees. We do regular briefings for the community. In fact, we were over there talking to the whole community as part of the Stewart Island Promotions Association briefing just 3 weeks ago. So I think we enjoy really good support, to be honest.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you for submitting, Ray. We will consider all submissions during deliberations. So thanks for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
There's another Zoom one.
Huge one. Parental proof fence was one.
Yes.
Things just swung around.
So I think we'll welcome Dr. Valentine to present on behalf of the Fiordland Marine Guardians. Welcome, Ellie.
Morena. Ellie Valentine. I'm a member of the Fiordland Marine Guardians and I'll be presenting their submission on their behalf today. Apologies for Chairman of the Guardians, Rebecca McLeod, who was unable to be here today. So just a little bit about ourselves to begin with. The Guardians were established under the Fiordland Marine Management Act 2005. This was a groundbreaking piece of legislation which reflected the special nature of this part of Aotearoa, which enabled innovative measures to achieve the vision that the quality of Fiordland's marine environment, including the wider fishery experience, be maintained for future generations to use and enjoy. Our functions include promoting integrated management of the Fiordland marine area, working with the agencies in an advisory capacity, and to advise and make recommendations to ministers and agencies who have functions and responsibilities in the FMA. We are focused on risk identification and mitigation and are therefore future focused. And we have a holistic view of the myriad of issues that Fiordland faces, including biosecurity, visitor pressure and fisheries, to name but a few. The Guardians and Environment Southland work together on a wide range of matters encompassing marine biosecurity, navigational safety, planning, consents, compliance, communication and public engagement. Our thanks to Council for the positive discussions we had with councillors when we met with the Strategy and Policy Committee in February, and for their commitment to hold a workshop to discuss the matters we raised, particularly relating to the risk posed by the transitional period between coastal plans and marine biosecurity. Excuse me, I've got a cold. Today, we'd like to expand on those matters, the need for their inclusion in this LTP, and any impact that could have on the funding of this plan. Firstly, the risk posed by the transition period between the coastal plans. Our observations are, there's been an influx of applications for new surface water activity consents, renewals and or variations to existing consents which encompass bigger vessels, high levels of activity and increased geographical scope. Of concern are very limited scope to oppose expansion under the current coastal plan, the inability under the plan to address cumulative effects, the increased impacts on natural character, natural features and landscape values in ways that will be difficult to reverse. We urge Council to keep up the pace with the review of the coastal plan and also to initiate a plan change to the existing plan to help mitigate the issues we have raised. And as advised, the Guardians now have a clear position on the provision of written approvals for resource consent applications. We will not be providing for any approval for any new surface water activities in the FMA until such time as their cumulative effects can be adequately measured and assessed. And the proposed plan chain is in place to ensure the values of this unique area are not eroded any further by increasing levels of activity. This decision has not been taken lightly, but we're mindful of our statutory responsibilities as guardians of the Fiordland Marine area and the need to act now due to this current policy deficit. Marine biosecurity, dealing with Undaria and keeping other pests out. Our observations are: Environment South will lead the way with the Fiordland Marine Pest Pathways Management Plan. There is a high level of support and engagement for the plan from the community, and the Guardians are working with Biosecurity New Zealand on regional initiatives to aid a national approach to marine biosecurity. Of concern, monitoring of and compliance with the plan is not adequately resourced, and it's not easy for operators to comply, e.g. haul-out facilities. Our advice is, look to increase resourcing on marine biosecurity monitoring and compliance, advance the proposed Bluff vessel haul-out facility and ensure it is designed to be compliant from a biosecurity perspective, consider expanding the geographical scope of the Pathways Plan, and encourage dialogue with neighbouring regional councils to enhance and align pathway approaches. Dependent on any decisions made at Council's upcoming workshop with TAMI board members to discuss our concerns, and in particular a plan change to the existing coastal plan, how will this be funded with no income currently being received from the cruise ship levy? Finally, we're pleased to see that this workshop has been held on June 29th. Therefore, there are no timing issues for Council to meet the deadline for adopting the long-term plan as it relates to any recommendations made at this workshop. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ellie. Any questions?
Very comprehensive.
Yeah, obviously, from your submission, you would be keen to see the pathways and we have extended around New Zealand, which would obviously make things quite a bit better.
Absolutely, and we did submit to Otago Regional Council on that, so yeah. I think it would, there's a lot of holes out there at the moment that people can slip through. And there's still, I think, a lack of awareness of the pathway plan as well.
Thanks for that. Any further questions really this morning? If not, thank you very much for coming in and submitting this morning. And obviously, we will thoroughly look at all recommendations during the deliberation process, and we will be informed at the end of where we end up. So thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you, Nicole.
The Zoom one hasn't come back, obviously. So. Oh, no, it's just So we'll now go to the new arrest forum and welcome Richard Kite to submit this morning. Richard, you have 10 minutes. You can split that up how you like, but you want to speak for 5 minutes and have 5 minutes of questions, but it's up to you. And so we've all read your submission, but submit, yeah. Submission. I certainly hope they have, but just you say make your points.
It's not too long if you'd like me to read it. I know you've got a lot to get through. So yes, here to represent the New River Estuary Forum and our submission on the ES long-term plan. The New River Estuary Forum are pleased to see a range of positive projects being planned for Southland over the next 10 years, but we're concerned that no thought has been given to addressing the ongoing decline in the New River Estuary in terms of particularly in terms of leaching from the Invercargill's old rubbish dump into the estuary at Pleasure Bay. This is an area of concern not specifically addressed in the Marine Reserve Policy or Infrastructure Strategy, with funding recently secured to strengthen the Stead Street Stop Bank. An excellent opportunity exists in conjunction with the Invercargill City Council to consider whether similar engineering solutions might be possible to limit the flow of leachate entering the estuary at Pleasure Bay. Many older residents of Invercargill have fond memories of Pleasure Bay and its white pebbly beach. However, the decision to locate the city's old rubbish dump beside the estuary and ongoing discharge of contaminated stormwater and treated sewage into its waters has meant that things have deteriorated markedly since then. The estuary proximity to the airport and Te Araha Trail also makes this area an ideal gateway to Murihiku Southland. Despite the estuary's current state, many Southlanders are still using the walkways around Pleasure Bay for walking, cycling, photography, and potential exists for the city to invest in developing a waterfront that we can all be proud of. While a range of funding sources may be required to achieve such a vision, including this in Environment Southland's long-term plan would demonstrate a commitment working with the community to restore the estuary in the medium to longer term. Thank you. So that's basically, yes, looking at where you could incorporate that into your long-term plan. The New Estuary Forum has a long-term vision for restoration of the estuary, and the rubbish dump is one of those areas that really hasn't been addressed.
I've got a number of questions. I've got Robert, Peter, then Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Richard. I'm just interested in how widely you're casting your net for ideas about approaches to improving the qualities of that estuary. What I mean is it just your committee that's brainstorming about this, or are you going way beyond?
No, the New Estuary Forum itself has a range of groups who are involved. We get between 40 and 60 people to some of our meetings. iwi are also connected with this and looking at the way forward. So it's a real community view on the estuary. The thought with the forum was the through land and water, the upstream nutrients and sediments are being taken care of. Three waters, looking at the outflows from the Invercargill waste. But I suppose it's the one area that really isn't addressed, but does have a big impact. And there's also public health concerns around the leachate and people collecting kai from those areas.
Okay, good, thank you.
Peter.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thanks Richard for your submission. So just picking up on the same point, you talked about a leachate into Pleasure Bay. Do you think that there's immediate intervention?
From a public health perspective, it falls in a bit of a gap there. Public health won't step in because there isn't the data there, but we do know that the old rubbish dump is actually leaching. The monitoring by Invercargill City Council is done around their purposes, to their consent, which may not fit with a public health approach to that. So it actually, in a sense, it's fallen in a gap between the two councils, and we actually believe there needs to be a bit of leadership around looking at this issue.
I've got Neville, then Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Just it would be helpful if you tell us what's the membership of your forum, please.
The membership?
Yeah.
So we've got most as in numbers, or
no, well, organisations or
so from the rowing club through to I can't tell you offhand, but I could actually send a list through. Yeah, it's quite a I suppose it's more a public forum for people to come along and take part in the concern around the estuary.
to say there's a driving force behind it. It's not just yourself.
No, certainly not. There's a core group who lead, which is Liz Craig, Jane Kitson, Sarah Thorne, who's with and myself. So we've brought that together, but we've had a lot of support from the community, and certainly we have been involved in the discussions. And there's quite a long-term vision for what could be done with the area, but to go forward, there needs to be something done with the issues that are already here.
Thank you.
And finally, with Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, it's a big project to undertake the restoration, the fixing of an estuary that's been underloved for a long period of time. So have you submitted also on some of the territorials long-term plans? Did you go to the cities and
we
the southern districts?
We submitted them to Invercargill City Council to look at the same issue. So that's our other submission, and we do recognise it's not a quick fix, but if we don't make a start, it won't. Certainly, nothing will happen.
Thank you for coming in and submitting this morning, Richard. Yeah, obviously, we'll consider all submitters during the deliberations, and you'll get confirmation before we end up in due course. But yeah, thanks for coming in. Right now, I believe we have Christine Henderson zooming in. Are you there, Christine? Well, welcome, Christine. 10 minutes, possibly 5 minutes to speak and 5 minutes for questions. Just if you'd like to use it. Councillors will have read your submission, so possibly you'd like to summarise your main points. But the floor is yours, Christine. Welcome. We're not hearing you, Christine. Are you there? There she is. Welcome, Christine. Did you hear that introduction? We're still not hearing you. You don't appear to be muted. You there, Christine? Technology is wonderful, isn't it? Christine is online, but obviously is not hearing us.
I'm just as happy before Christine's system.
Yep.
Thought we had it fixed, but obviously it's not fixed.
Christine's system.
What?
Very frustrated, but we can't. Before the last time, I'm not sure what's happened today.
Thank you very much for that information, because that, if it's not at this end.
She had to ring through on the transport committee, didn't she, because her internet one didn't work.
So I could try and arrange to phone Christine and.
Okay,
so that way
right.
it's
Good.
Yep. We do have a break now because we've taken the other submission ahead of time. Linda Baker, she needs one, she's not due for a while, so. we
Right,
can-
so we recess for a few minutes until you can.
Someone else to the back.
Alright, Linda Baker is here apparently, so we could take her ahead of time and I'll.
Okay.
Christine and
Okay, we will move to Wendy Baker. Welcome, Wendy. Would you like to come forward? So you'll have heard the preamble from the last one's Wendy. You've got 10 minutes. You may want to use 5 minutes to summarise your submission and 5 minutes for questions, but we'll allow you to have a wee bit of flexibility on the balance there. So welcome, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, so my submission is pretty short. Just like to say, my 2 cents worth in, or a bit more, regarding the rates increase. Your 20% or your 16% option, I think they're both too high. And yeah, just consideration for people that, you know, have not got the income and stuff that, just more consideration I feel needs to be taken into account regarding the high percentage of rates. I actually have got a petition, it's just closed, to increase the rates rebate for people that are eligible. So I think it's important that people actually do, or the government re-examines the rates rebate and increases it, since rates are going up throughout New Zealand. I just wanted to say praise the service of Environment Southland. Just recently I've had a couple of things that I've had to ring the council about, and I've had really good service, and in one case there was a little bit of a misunderstanding, and your council apologised, and I think that's very admirable that when a mistake is, happens, that your council says sorry immediately. So, yeah, just want to say that's great service so far. Winter grazing monitoring. I think there needs to be more monitoring of farms. Noticed cows and sheep recently in mud. It's upsetting being a farmer's daughter. You know, my father, I'm wearing my ancestors' medals today. My father, he was in World War II, a passionate farmer. We had 100 acres, 70 cows back in the 70s and 80s, and there was green pastures. There was none of this winter grazing and cows in mud, and it's really upsetting to see that. And my grandfather and my great uncle, who served in World War I, they were farmers too, farmhands. So yeah, pretty strong about seeing our pastures keep green and in good condition and our cows healthy. But I'll go into that a little bit more. 3, just on my notes there in the beginning of my submission, coal. I think there needs to be more air testing. You do it in Invercargill and Gore, in other little rural towns. There can be quite a, smoky kind of on still cooler days, and it would be good to do some monitoring in some rural towns like Nightcaps where I live. The Asthma Society has got a letter that I've put in with my submission, and I'll just go briefly through the other pages of my submission. I have a regional council background, as you can see. I worked for Environment Bay of Plenty for nearly 8 years, so I care passionately and deeply about our environment in many ways. And on that note, I'd just like to read you my poem that I wrote a number of years ago. It's called Environment. Our environment is important, and we need to do our best to protect it and respect it, as it is our treasure chest. For our environment is nature, and nature helps us live, be it vegetables for ourselves or grass for stock. Nature graciously gives. There is also the pleasure that our environment brings to us, like walking along the river, lake, beach, or in the bush. So please clear about our environment forever and a day, as nature gifts us overall well-being with its special, valuable display. Just moving on to, I've printed out a article which I actually saw in the Southland Express last year, and it mentions about SAFE, the animal rights group, and cows calving in mud, which was, it's a bit upsetting. And I've actually recently been in touch with a SAFE representative recently. Then I've seen the article about 7 farms investigated for winter grazing breaches from last year. I just, as I said before, would appreciate more monitoring of that. There's the Asthma Society New Zealand letter, moving on to coal. It says in here, New Zealand has the second highest rate of asthma in the world, and it can be triggered obviously by different things, and coal dust is a significant one in Southland. I've done a lot of work with the Asthma Society in the past, and there's a survey on the impacts of coal mining. There's something, I don't know much about it, but I went onto the Coal Action Network Aotearoa, and there was something about Southland District Council and a time to say no to new coal mines. You see a couple of examples. It's not very clear, but that's the car cover that I had on my car at Nightcaps. And I collected this off it one morning after we'd had a bit of rain, and it's going to be tested by your team to see if it is what it is. Could it be coal and stuff like that? But it was quite concerning. I felt it was quite concerning in the air, and that's why I had put that in about air quality and testing, please. More about Asthma Society. When I worked for Environment Environment Bay of Plenty, our council got an advocacy award, and that was to do with the Asthma Society because we had privet in our area, and it was we had created a project. There was a few complaints obviously about privet, and I'm saying this because there's lots of different things that trigger asthma, and it's important to recognise that you can do something about it if you care. And yeah, so is that my time? Thank you.
We'll see if there's any, I might be able to try for a couple of questions. Right, but Lloyd then Peter.
Yeah, thank you, really. I just wanted you to explain that black ganja that.
Well, it was. Okay, you can have a look at it if you want. When it settles, it just, it's like a coal dust, basically. And so it could have come out of chimneys, soot or something, or it could be sediment, in the air or something. So I don't know. It's
settled on your car.
Yeah, it settled in because it rained and it was a still night and it was cold. So people might have been starting their fires or whatever, and it just settled in the puddles or whatever you like to call them in the car on the car cover. So I collected that, and
Be interesting to see that.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if they can test it. But it is quite concerning. I felt it was quite concerning.
Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Committee for your submission. It's quite comprehensive what you've sent in, and mainly a large part to do with air quality.
Yes.
Concerns.
Yeah.
Around during cold. You feel as though the initiatives around climate change is coming to the rescue of it for you.
I think there's a lot of people that are concerned with, obviously, with, I think there needs to be alternative energy, like it says in the Asthma Society letter. It's quite an eye-opener if you read that letter from the CE of Asthma New Zealand. You know, it's got some points that I didn't even know. You know, when I was growing up, we used to have an open fire and coal was freely used, but it didn't affect the kids, you know, growing up, us as kids. So I think it's important to look at that seriously and try and change and address and just monitor the air issues and see if there is anything in the air. I mean, how do you monitor Invercargill and Gore air? How is that monitored, actually?
We unfortunately can't get into a question and answer, but we
No,
can.
no,
We'll
but
give you,
yeah,
we'll give you
I
the
just thought I'd throw it out there.
But look, your time is up, but thanks for coming in and submitting this morning. All submissions will be considered during deliberations and you will hear the final result. And we'll make a note to actually put something in about how we do monitor.
Yeah, that'd be lovely, thank you.
So thank you.
We have both Christine Henderson, she's the telephone caller there online, and Shona Sangster for Rakiura.
Okay, we'll go. Can you hear me, Christine? Are you there, Christine?
Christine, you need to unmute yourself.
Yay.
Hello?
We've got Shannon's here.
I'm not Christine.
Right, you're next. You'll be next, Shona. We're just trying to, we have some difficulty getting Christine. Can you hear me, Christine? Okay, you need to unmute. Once again, the technology is giving us some issues.
We'll keep trying that. Perhaps we'll go to Shona Sangster then go back to Christine.
Okay, we'll go to Shona instead. Are you there, Shona?
Kia ora.
Welcome. Shona, you have 10 minutes. You may want to summarise your submission for 5 minutes and have questions, but you've got a bit of flexibility there. So welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi hoki aho. Ko Arthur Seat toku moanga, ko Leith toku awa, ko Dan Ishtin toku marae, ko Clan Morrison toku iwi. Ko Shona Sangster toku ingoa, ko Ben Hopkins toku hoa rangatira, no Rakiura aho. Ina mana, ina reo, ina rau rangatira ma. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Shona Sangster. I'm coming to speak to you from the Stewart Island Rakiura Community and Environment Trust from beautiful sunny Rakiura today. Our submission to the long-term plan was around our relationship and the funding that we've received from Environment Southland in the past. So in the past, we've received $10,000 per annum for biosecurity and $5,000 per annum for weed control. We firstly want to thank Environment Southland for this money and what it has allowed us to achieve here on Stewart Island. And obviously, we want to seek a continued relationship with Environment Southland. I understand that the Environmental Enhancement Fund is now going to be the way to do this, but I would be curious, I would be keen to learn more about those criteria. I would also like to kind of update Environment Southland on our work. So we are still working on 210 hectares of ecological restoration. we have been lucky enough to receive some significant Jobs for Nature funding, which we are in the process of ramping up, which is going to allow us to employ up to 17 FTE over the next 2 years. And that will allow us to hopefully really increase our weed control and our predator control. So our goal is to have a 2/3 to 1/3 weed to predator ratio for those employees. So we're really hoping to actually tackle quite seriously the Darwin's barberry that we've been working away at with Environment Southland's help. But this funding is only 2 years. So we need to look at what our future is going to be and how we're able to sustain this work after those 2 years ends. And that's where we really want to continue to work closely, fruitfully, and in partnership with Environment Southland. Yes, your support has been crucial to us. And I know I would like to acknowledge as well that our issues are very different to the rest of the Environment Southland rohi. we have our own set of challenges, but they are quite different, and we appreciate the flexibility that you have had that has allowed us to work together with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shona. Any questions for Shona this morning? Lloyd.
Yeah, I had one. Yeah, thank you, Shona. It's Lloyd Esler here. Just wondering what your relationship is with CIRSA. Are they part of you, or is that a separate organisation with different goals?
I'm speaking here on behalf of CIRSA, the Stewart Island Community Environment Trust.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm the chair of that trust.
Peter, then Alan.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Shona. Peter McDonald here. I was just wondering if you've got any comment on, it's been widely known about the tourism pressures on Stewart Island, and what relation is that relative to issues around biosecurity and the things you deal with as a trust too? Do you see your work having to ramp up alongside increased tourism numbers?
Yes, there is an impact for us, but I would say it's a double-edged sword. There is a biosecurity issue. People can bring in, especially weeds, in the weed space, seeds can be very, very readily transported by trampers and people who've, been out in the bush. But then also tourism for us can be a little bit of a godsend, because it's often tourists who want to look to give back. And one of the ways that they do that often is by supporting us. We have a number of initiatives, such as our Adopt a Trap program, which allows people to virtually adopt a trap online and then see its catch results. And that's proved really popular with tourism. So there's pressures, but then there's also benefits, I guess I would say.
Thank you.
Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just clarifying in my mind, you've talked a lot about the problem weeds, but are you also focused on the problem pests, as in the rats and stoats and possums? Is that also part of your engagement?
Yes, certainly it is. We're fortunate not to have stoats to worry about, but we run a trapping program that targets rats, possums, and feral cats. And I would note that we're actually probably staring down the barrel of another mast year for the Remu, which is going to be a huge food source for those predators. Last time this happened in 2019, we saw a massive, massive upsurge in rat numbers and then feral cat numbers on the back of that readily available food source.
Lloyd.
Yeah, I have one more question, thank you. I'm just wondering, do you extend as far as Mason Bay? Is that part of your control area because there's lupins and other bits and pieces, or is that just left up to DOC to do with 17 full-time ones? You have quite a pool to make quite a substantial difference to a lot of the issues on Stewart Island.
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. And I do appreciate the problem with the lupin at Mason. The Masons area is outside of our kind of proposed sphere of influence, but we are looking. So our current project area is 210 hectares of the Acres Point Peninsula, which you'll be familiar with. And we're looking at some possibilities for expansion, but it would not be as far as Masons Bay. We generally do tend to leave that up to the Department of Conservation.
Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora, Shona, Lyndall Ludlow speaking. Just wondering whether you are seeking a continuation of the current funding or an increase, and if an increase, what numbers would you put around that?
We were looking initially at a continuation rather than an increase at this stage, but I'm very aware that in 2 years we may need to seek, possibly be looking at some kind of increase, and that would be, I guess, within the lifetime of this plan. Am I right? I couldn't yet quantify a number around that, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you for submitting this morning, Shona, and we will consider all submissions during the deliberation phase. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Have we had any more luck with?
Yes, Christine is there, and I just need to Christine, if you could unmute yourself again, because I did mute you when you came in, so you have to push *6 to do that.
Hello.
Hello. You're finally there.
Believe it.
Well, welcome, Christine. You have 10 minutes. You may wish to summarise your submission for 5 minutes, and you have questions, but the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, and I appreciate the opportunity. Noted with interest, the Moray of the river is being reinstated as part of the assessment of the rivers, and I must tell you that it was a keynote in the beginning of our negotiations and the way our working party way back when we started, but quickly got lost in the financial negotiations that followed. So the spiritual values of the river have kept me and a lot of other people at that table for all this length of time to little avail. So I'm looking forward to having either 50 or 400 cubics put back into that river as a reflection of the Moray. I'm very unhappy with the way things have gone over this time, and as I'm a representative of Forest and Bird, I'll be letting them know how concerned I am about the way the Waiau has been treated over these years. Meridian at the moment trying to disenfranchise the Waiau Working Party after all this time. Presumably what they want a clear run post-TY, but we really must look at the river before any decisions are made, and I'd like the Environment Southland to convene a major summit on that river so that we can talk through the options, because there's so many people gathering around with all their green hydrogen and all these other things that they want to do with all that river water. But in fact, until we get the river back into some healthy state, it will not be sustainable under any circumstances or criteria. Right, moving on to transport. Tim Cadogan, Mayor of Central Otago, was on the radio this morning talking about the fact that New Zealand NZTA has not given them sufficient funds for the gravel and bridges that they need to upgrade. This is my link with NZTA is over the last 5 years where I've been trying to shift a couple of signs in Lumsden to avoid a disaster happening on our road. In that time, I've learned a lot about NZTA, including their priorities, which aren't Otago and Southland roads. South Road said that our roads are in such a poor state that we really should only be travelling at 80 k's, which tells us something about their priorities. During the last few years, 30% of our RUCs were siphoned off for roads of national importance. Wellsford to Puhoi was one of them. I want to know, and I'm hoping that the transport section of Environment Southland can find out whether that's still happening, because we could do with that 30% being reinstated in Southland because of our small population and large area, which puts us at a disadvantage both in terms of infrastructure and health funding. Roads and bridges and all those sorts of things have to be considered a strategic asset for the whole country, and we got a whiff of that with the Ashburton Bridge being put out, and we had to have goods transported from Christchurch through the west coast, down through Central and up to Invercargill, because that bridge was out of commission. It's an integrated economic asset, and it's high time it was reinstated as a government-funded asset, because it used to be, until they took it away under market forces, presumably. Rail passenger services, I was on the last trip down to Invercargill from Christchurch on the train, and I please want it back, because as part of our climate change initiative, we should be pushing for that to get a lot of transport off the road, not just goods, but also people. The roads are so awful. I'm thrilled that you're looking at natural integrated flood management linked with wetlands and indigenous vegetation protection. Just wondering if, you don't have to answer this, but do you work with the Southland District Council? But because I sense that some of the decisions they make aren't going to be helpful in that respect. I noticed that the NZR wants the rail bridge at Gore raised, because if you raise the flood banks at Gore, that puts increased pressure on the bridges and presumably has downstream effects. Designing with nature is really a good idea, and I love the fact that you're looking at that. I want, and a lot of other people probably do too, full protection of upper catchments. It used to be Section 34 before the RMA, and it was considered vitally important that the upper catchments be protected from clearance or planting in exotics because of their importance in catchment protection and water quality and quantity. So I'd like to see that reinstated, please, as a matter of urgency, because we know that exotic forests are not helpful in that respect. And that you're working with farmers is really good, and I want that to carry on through the SNAs. And I like the thought that you're working on the same sort of protocol as you are with winter grazing, where you get the farmers together and all the other interested parties and work it through and put it on the farm plan. I think that's a great idea. Somebody suggested that, and I thought, well, that's brilliant, because it takes away another level of bureaucracy, and it's just easy. And then if it's followed up with fencing and pest control, rates for emission and carbon credits, mostly funded from government, but the rates for emission, of course, would be Environment Southland, then it's our way of thanking the farmers for protecting up till now what they've got there, and also for future protection. And they do need to have the carbon credits allocated to them. So that's about the lot, I think. This QE2 funding, evidently not well funded at the moment, and I'd like to see more of that. I don't know whether Environment Southland has that mandate or not. But it would be good to have that done, because that's another conduit for farmers to protect their indigenous wetlands and cover off their own initiative.
Thank you, Christine. Have we got any questions for Christine? I've got Alan, then Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, hi, Christine. So, yeah, thank you for your submission. Just a question really on native plantings. Are we planting enough natives along our waterways, and is there enough availability of native plants to ensure we can continue at a reasonable pace?
I think that the more we plant, Alan, the more there'll be support from nurseries and other interested parties to provide those plants, because that's one growth industry I'd really like to see. And I think it'd probably become a bit more sophisticated too, because we're now finding out how important some native plants are to the riparian areas. And so it's an exciting future for it. I think that we will ramp up as we used to with the exotic plantation nurseries. So yes, I think that's there are lots of entities out there already doing it, and I think it's just a case of them. I think this is one thing big I can handle, Alan.
Peter.
I think it'll happen.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Christine. Peter McDonald here. Just I'll pick up on one of your comments. You've written in here, full protection of upper catchment from exotic plantings. Is that not at odds with the Climate Change Commission's initiatives?
No, it isn't, I don't think, Peter, because we can still plant exotic plantations, but not on upper catchments. There'll be other places, not necessarily on good farmland, thank you, but on other places that work. But upper catchments really should be reinstated as full protection with native cover, because then they can be permanent climate change carbon sequestration units, and which is what we're working towards. And exotic plantations really should be closer to transport as a start, but also in areas which that is agreed that they could handle. But mass planting of exotics on upper catchments and even middle catchments probably has had its day, I would think. So bring back natives for the upper catchments because they still do the same job and they're there for longer. And then look at the right tree in the right place, I think is the mantra, isn't it, to get those exotic plantations put somewhere, because we do need them. I'm a big fan of laminated timber buildings, and we will need that exotic plantations for those. And I'd like to see less planting by overseas interests, which then take them away offshore, and more planting by New Zealand interests, so that we do have a timber industry that we can rely on and that will keep us in good stead over the next 100 years.
Thank you for submitting this morning, Christine. We will consider all submissions during the deliberations. So finally, we have a few technical problems, but you got there, Christine. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Bye.
We've been on to clear, I think, he's here.
Not sure. Not sure.
Next matter isn't quite immediate. Must be due at 500.
And give Jan a clap for managing to get Christine. Give that woman a pay rise. Oh, hang on, wait.
Rectified. I would ask,
Thank you.
come forward, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman Nicol. It's rather amusing to be on this side of the table for a change.
So you know the rules.
I know the rules, and trust me, you won't have to use the gong for me. I'm really only here because Invercargill City said that it was very important that it demonstrates the value of the partnership that it sees with Environment Southland. You've got the submission in front of you, and quite frankly, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll take it as read, happy to answer any questions, as long as they're within my area of knowledge. I'll defer to the experts if need be. That's it. Yes, look, I think we've given our points quite succinctly there, sets out the views, and I'm sure that you're able to understand them perfectly. But we do value the relationship, both at a staff level and at an elected member level. And I think we've recognised that Southland is presented better when it speaks with one voice, and it sees the need for a strong relationship between the authorities.
Thank you for those comments, Claire. I'll put some questions for Peter, then Lloyd Esler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for that, Claire. Just pick up on your point, Invercargill City Council has formed a working group on climate change. It looks forward to working with Environment Southland on this issue. Can you provide any more detail on the working group?
My understanding is that your officers and my officers and some others are working together. And I can hear Wilma confirming that in the background.
Okay, and that's progressing?
That is progressing, yes. Yeah.
Lloyd.
Yes. One of the things that's sort of been a bit of a topic recently is the old waste, the old rubbish dump area, and obviously a lot of joint work has to happen with that. So we sort of understand the ES's role in that. What is ICC doing about this issue on its doorstep, rather than just do this?
Can I just clarify that you're referring to New River Estuary? Right, so we are working through the scientific evidence in relation to New River Estuary. We've got officers that are in close contact with the group that's been formed around that, and looking to see what actions we need to take, whether it's further plantings or indeed further remedial work. But we're
very much working upon let's get the evidence, let's collect the materials so that we can respond appropriately.
Thank you. Just reminding councillors, we can only ask questions of clarification, but Eric.
Yeah, thank you. And look, I'm just noting your comments on rates increase and the 30% impact on residents within Invercargill. Is that averaged across the board, or is there some discrepancy north and south of various places? And how does the sort of equity level of that sit within the boundary?
Councillor, I'm going to ask you to defer to your staff on that, because I think I don't have the details of exactly how. And look, we're not seeking to make a judgment on the increase you find necessary. We're just advocating on behalf of the ratepayers.
Thank you. Further questions? You've posed a couple of very good questions there, but I guess you know the rules. We can respond to you later, but we can't actually debate. But they are questions we need to discuss together, and I appreciate you raising them.
Look, if I could just say one other thing, we would ask the resource consents. We would ask, we understand the matter of costs, but it would be really useful. We feel that it'd be really useful for your public, for our public, to better understand the reasons for those increases. And we might ask you to consider staggering those increases. But again, it comes back to the evidence base of what's driving the need for that increase.
Further questions? Jeremy.
I'll ask one more. Just in regards to the loan schemes, like the clean air loan schemes, and you're obviously asking that it recommend that the scheme is now reviewed, and maybe because there's a bit of lack of uptake in some of the loans, do you feel that the ICC with their administrative fee being charged, whereas obviously Gore doesn't charge a fee in regards to the administration, is that just one wee thing that could be hindering, it's another wee cost?
It may be. I wouldn't have any evidence to support that one way or other. It is certainly administratively heavy for the value that the community is getting from it. And the point that we're making is that you can now get those through commercial banks. I might offer a personal opinion, having come from somewhere where air quality was a very strong matter of contention, that I haven't heard a lot of discussion about air quality in Southland. And so the uptake may be related to people's prioritisation.
Further questions? Thanks for coming in and submitting this morning, Claire.
I assured you that you kept time. Thank you. I wish you well with your deliberations.
Thank you. Next up is the Southland District Health Board. Welcome. So welcome. You have 10 minutes. You may wish to summarise your submission for the first half, a bit of flexibility, and then have some questions, but the floor is yours. Welcome.
Right, thank you. Kia ora, Mr. Chairman and fellow councillors. Called Tom Scott Tokoingo. I'm the team leader of the Policy and Strategy team at Public Health South Southern DHB. With me today I've got Renee Cubitt. She's a Health Protection Officer from our Invercargill officer. And with me today also I have Professor John Eastwood, who will soon be gazetted as a Medical Officer of Health. As well as providing a bit of contextual information, my verbal submission will relate to water, community resilience and air. Just to acknowledge that through your work with air quality, emergency management, water and public transport, regional councils are big contributors to public health outcomes across their regions. It's for this reason, we're keen to see this work is done well. Your work also supports the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we see particularly relevant Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, Goal 13, protecting health from climate change, Goal 15, protecting and promoting sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, and Goal 17, partnerships for the goals. We acknowledge the pressure Environment Southland is under in terms of the National Policy Statement of Freshwater 2020, NPSFW 2020. Our people will continue to work with your staff as you work through both these processes and are very keen to ensure that the public health perspective is clearly articulated. An issue relating to the public health impacts of water quality was highlighted recently when we were looking at the contamination risks to the Dunedin domestic water supply from the Taieri River catchment. In that catchment, a number of critical contamination risks were identified that were very clearly under the jurisdiction of the Regional Council. It was just a pity the Regional Council was not at the table to speak to those risks on that occasion. If we were to draw a parallel with the Ariti River, if it wasn't for the very effective treatment of the water by the Invercargill City Council at Branksome, public health risks to the residents of Invercargill would be huge. Clearly, strategies aimed at improving the quality of raw water in this river would serve as an upstream mitigation of these public health risks. Groundwater is also an issue, as we are aware there are several areas in Southland where nitrate levels in groundwater are well in excess of the maximum allowable value for drinking water in New Zealand. Again, with the effective implementation of NPSFW 2020, we will hopefully see a reversal of what has been a deteriorating trend over a number of years. The second direct public health risk associated with water is that used for recreational contact. It is for this reason that we collaborate with Environment Southland, the Otago Regional Council, iwi and local authorities as the summer bathing water programs in the Southern District are considered. This includes standardising approaches to monitoring and effective public health risk communication. Environmental monitoring and communication staff from regional councils work with local authority environmental health and engineering staff. Water quality and the factors that affect it are a key issue here too. You will no doubt be aware that low river flows also impact bathing water quality, including flows that can give rise to phytoplankton production. These are just some examples of the work we do in conjunction with Environment Southland. During the course of the coming years, we look forward to you as you adapt your current Water, Land and People program to incorporate NPSFW 2020. We are confident that the concept of Te Mana o Te Wai, once it is achieved, will go a long way in addressing public health risks of freshwater also. We certainly appreciate the external financial pressure NPSFW places on regional councils and appreciate this and the need to repair the flood management system will see a shift in prioritisation of expenditure over the next 10 years. Given the impacts of climate change, we're mindful that weather events seen in 2020 in Southland and very recently in Canterbury are likely to occur more frequently in future. Populations that are vulnerable to these increasing risks are older adults, those with chronic disease, young children, and those on low incomes or predominantly work outdoors. We draw your attention to the social vulnerability indicators for natural hazards work that has been done by Environmental Health New Zealand using the 2018 census data. Air quality is a key determinant of public health. We've been working actively with the air pollution specialist in the National Institute of Water and Atmosphere on air quality projects in South Invercargill and soon to be applied in Gore. These studies are showing patterns of contamination of air quality that is largely attributable to domestic heating in the winter. This work is being extended to look at the link between outdoor air quality and the quality of air in people's homes. Where we can, we like to work to establish a relationship between air quality and human health at the local level as well. As with bathing water, we support a Southern District-wide approach to air quality with regular meetings of Otago Regional Science, Air Quality and Communication Specialists, local authority regulators, iwi, and the National Institute of Water and Atmosphere. We examine air quality issues and collaborate on ways we can intervene with a view to improving it. For example, Environment Southland's Good Wood program is being picked up in Otago. We are also happy to offer support on the implementation of the revised air quality standards. As I understand it, they've been delayed due to a need for the Ministry for the Environment staff to work on RMA reforms. And in particular, are keen to support the revision of your air quality plan. Given the availability of coal in Southland and the compelling environmental and public health reasons for reducing the consumption of it, we will be advocating for the inclusion of sulphur as an indicator of ambient air quality in that plan. Well, thanks for listening to us. We'll look forward to working with you and your staff and your work as it relates to air quality work, water and regional transport during the coming years. Please feel free to ask any questions relating to either this presentation or our written submission.
Thank you. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've made another number of comments around the working relationship. Do you think that and it's obviously staff to staff, do you think that a board to council relationship should be established with the issues that you're raising, that it might actually help some of our work streams working together more?
I think it would. I think possibly the issue, I guess, with the District Health Board is a lot of our work escapes their attention. They tend to be very focused on the operational requirements of the hospital itself. The other thing, of course, is that our board will cease to exist as of June next year, and we'll be working for the Health New Zealand. As I say, with the expanding role of the expansion of our medical officer of health services, I think possibly there's an opportunity for an engagement at that level in the future.
Any further questions? Robert.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Tom. Curiously enough, my question was almost what Lloyd asked, and that was about the conduit of communication between yourselves and us. And you say there's changes here, but I'm still wondering, is there an open bypassing of information that you think sufficiently immediate? And why I ask is my second question, that's around nitrates in water, and whether your board, your organisation has done research on the latest findings, which may be linking nitrates to, say, bowel cancer. And can you then, or are you able to alert us to where you're at in terms of your understanding? Do those channels exist, and are they good enough?
I think if we were to find out new stuff, new research, and I think this is probably going to be looming fairly soon, actually. I'm just aware of some research in the background that I think will be of interest to regional councils. We will be thinking very seriously about how we disseminate that, and that will obviously, we usually work with the council staff, and they will facilitate the engagement of the elected council members in that process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any further questions? If not, thank you very much for coming in and submitting this morning, and we will consider all submissions during deliberations and you'll the results. So thank you very much for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
team.
So many questions for the health committee. I have so many questions.
Is that clarification?
Trying to get rid of
Questions.
May not be relevant to this discussion, but I have.
Welcome, Christine. Can you turn off your mute?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Christine. You have 10 minutes. You may want to summarise your submission for the first half, but however you like to use it, that's fine, and then we can have some questions. But welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Sumner. I am a science officer with SPCA. I'm based out of Auckland, so it's nice to join you today via Zoom. And as suggested, I was just planning to review our submission, and then if there's any questions that anyone has, happy to answer them to the best of my capabilities. So first and foremost, we submitted on inviting council to engage with us on an MOU related to our very popular subsidized desexing program, which many of you might know as Snip and Chip. This is one of the key priorities of SPCA to reduce the unwanted population of cats and dogs in New Zealand. And this has major implications for animal welfare, but it also has implications for communities as it can help reduce nuisance. It has big implications for protecting biodiversity, as this would reduce the number of, reduce the threats and risks to native wildlife. And we also feel that, importantly, for cat and dog welfare, there's many different benefits for desexing, which I don't want to spend too much time on, but it is in our, we've created a table which breaks them down into categories that are on page 4 of our submission. Importantly, cats and dogs are very popular companion animals in New Zealand. And the most recent numbers put out last year is there's approximately 1.2 million companion cats in New Zealand. And there's approximately 851,000 dogs. We think desexing and microchipping are key parts of being a responsible pet owner. And however, it's not that simple. We can't just say be more responsible. We know based on research in New Zealand, the main barriers for desexing cats and dogs is the cost. This is one of the primary issues that we try to address with our Snip and Chip program. So importantly, we want to see human behavior change around this issue. And when we look at what is the behavior change we want, simply we want people to desex their cats and dogs. And when we know the primary barrier, or one of them, is the cost, our program Snip and Chip addresses that barrier. And when we actually provide this program, people take us up on it. This is a very popular program, and it can sell out in 40 minutes. So that's one of the reasons we are really working hard to engage with local government to work more closely with us in providing this service to communities, because we don't have an issue with getting people to take us up on this offer. And we would like to be able to expand our program and offer this service to however many people want to use it. So that being said, I think that pretty much is a overview of what Snip and Chip does, why it's important for us. And going forward, we have worked with councils, local councils. We've worked with regional council. Currently, we have a Snip and Chip that Auckland Regional Council has provided funding for. Now, this is a special one. It targets cats that are not necessarily where SPCA would target. We look at high intake areas. So these might be areas where the most number of cats are coming when we look at relinquishments or coming in as strays. However, the Auckland snip and chip, we're looking at ecological areas, so we're calling it kind of eco cats. Now, these are areas maybe not high density of cats, but it's very important to get these cats desexed because of the implications for protecting native biodiversity. So there is at least that example of where we have positively moved forward, working more with local councils. And with that, just being cognizant of my time and wanting to leave time for questions, I would just leave it as any further engagement would be to talk further on an MOU to work out details if council was interested. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Do we have any questions for Christine on her presentation? Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So Christine, how successful have you been at getting other councils to come on board? Have you started working your way down the country with on the various long-term plans, or you've
Thanks for that question. You are our second one that I have specifically known of on our radar. So we have we had an opportunity presented to us in a previous one that we're currently, so I went up to one hearing and made the same case, like, let's work together. This is this is the least controversial issue in the cat management space, whether you are advocating for the welfare of animals. And I focus on cats because frankly, cats are a bigger problem, I think, in New Zealand when it comes to desexing, especially when 92% of cat owners allow their cats to roam. This has massive implications for controlling the stray cat population and the feral cat population, as they do influence each other. You are the second one, to my knowledge, that we have submitted specifically to a long-term plan. But yes, to your point, this will be something we want to approach as a possible avenue for other councils.
Can I just have a supplementary, just
quickly? Yep.
So just on what it costs at the vet to get your cat desexed versus what this program Snip and Chip might result. Are you looking for half the savings, or what sort of savings might result from this program to the cat owner?
Yeah, they're all different. So there is a pattern. We work with vets. Working with the local vets is critical. We don't normally have all these cats come into our centers to get desexed, because a lot of our centers might not even have a clinic. So we partner with veterinarians, and those costs vary. So I don't want to give you a known cost. And it also can be where, in some instances, we heavily subsidize the snip and chip voucher. So maybe somebody might pay a small fee of $10 or $20. However, in Invercargill, we fully subsidize the cost for community service card holders. So that's just an example of where that's how they've gone forward with that particular, what the actual cost is and what we subsidize. And last year we desexed 382 animals. 248 of them were cats, 134 of them were dogs. And they came from all over Southland, but this work was done in Invercargill. And there is interest in wanting to continue this. The local folks in Invercargill see this as a big community benefit. And so certainly that type of detail as well, negotiating costs, would be something to work out in an MOU.
Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tēnā koe, Christine, Lyndall Nadlow speaking. Just wondering, you'll be aware that we are involved in biosecurity and pest management in a variety of ways. So I'm wondering what interactions you have with any of the other pest management agencies. So what interaction you have with any of the other groups that we are probably already working with in the cat, particularly the cat desexing space. Because obviously we don't want to fund the same thing twice, if you understand where I'm coming from.
Yes, sure, absolutely. To my knowledge, in Southland, I am not aware of any other work we're doing with other groups. And I think it gets tricky. We look at the push for desexing companion animals because they do contribute to the stray cat population, which then can contribute to the feral cat population. As you know, these cats, I think when it comes time to breed, they don't know that they're a companion cat versus a feral cat. That, you know, the populations have fluid movement between them. So we don't look at the companion cat desexing as pest management. I think even in the regional pest management plan, companion cats are considered a pest agent so that they actually can contribute to the pest status that cats have in the plan. But to my knowledge, we are not working with anyone else in Southland, but I can also find out more and confirm that.
Thank you. Yeah, it might be worth a conversation.
Yes.
Lloyd.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very aware of your program as you've outlined in your submission. But one of the issues we have is that I live on the side of the river, and at Christmas time we have a lot of animals turn up unexpectedly, half grown, half tame, going into the natural population. And my question really is, are you doing enough to capture those so that you actually capture them within the SPCA system, or are people just taking the easy option and dumping and thinking that's a conclusion over the Christmas holidays?
That's a good question. I think we're doing what we can with what we have right now. But I don't think would surprise anyone to say that more needs to be done. I think all of us in the room would agree much more work needs to be done. And I also think, well, first of all, dumping animals is an offense under the Animal Welfare Act. So if there are folks who are dumping companion animals out in the remote bush, that's already an issue under the Animal Welfare Act. The bigger issue being, are these stray cats? When does it become a stray cat? Or is this a friendly cat that nobody really has any ownership or guardianship over? These are so tricky with the stray cat space. Again, the companion space is a little more straightforward. This is why we target the person that we know is responsible for that cat. However, my point earlier, one of the reasons we submitted to your long-term plan is because we want to work more with others, because we think much more work can be done and should be done in this space. We would love to be able to have a future where there's no roaming unwanted cats. That's a future we want to see. We want to see cats that are owned and cared for and provided for. We also want to see protection of native biodiversity, and we know managing these cat populations is an incredibly important part of that. So absolutely more can be done.
Thank you. Thank you for submitting this morning, Christine. We will deliberate on all submissions, and all those submitters will see the final result. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
One more this morning.
Your last submitter this morning, Roger Hodgkinson has advised that he can't get in. He travelled to the North Island last week, and with the weather disruptions, he's still making his way back down the country. He has said that he will get in touch with council and interact with you on matters he wants to raise. That's a very
So on that note, we can recess for the morning, and I could have asked my question about should we snip and chip pet owners, but I thought I'd better not.
I'm just going to go home and put my cat inside. Oh, that's good.
Welcome back to the submission process this afternoon. People can take their places. We will invite Mr. Rick Dwayne, is it, Forest and Bird, to join us. I'd like to Rick, welcome. You've got 10 minutes. You may want to break it into a summary of your submission for 5 or so minutes and then answer some questions. We've all read your submissions, but no, the floor is yours, so welcome.
Right. Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for your time today. So I'm Rick Swan, the Regional Conservation Manager for Forest and Bird covering Otago and Southland. Sorry I can't be there in person today. I was down down in Invercargill on Monday, all ready for a week of mediation on the land and water plan, and then that got postponed. Anyway, Forest and Bird, we're broadly pretty positive with the direction of travel that the long-term plan's heading in. It is really good to see the investment that is going into freshwater and updating all the work on the land and water plan that we're going through, and the work to develop the future one and align that with the national policy statement on freshwater and the significant investment in science and policy work that's happening in that space. So encourage the council to continue to support that and increase the investment in that area where possible, so we can start to turn around the degradation of waterways in Southland that provide really important habitat for native fish. We are pleased to see the council making climate resilience a priority, but we would encourage the council to take a broader view of that, ensure it's focusing on a all-encompassing climate mitigation and adaptation plan. One thing I've noticed, and Environment Southland's not alone in this, is often councils will dress up the existing investment in flood protection and stock banks as climate mitigation measures, rather than putting more of a emphasis on climate mitigation more broadly in climate adaptation measures that may not necessarily be those hard engineering projects such as building more stock banks. So instead of just focusing on that, we'd encourage looking at how things like wetland restoration, restoring estuaries, and riparian habitats can help to reduce both the flooding risk while also providing habitat for native flora and fauna as well, and provide greater community resiliency. So we encourage the council to continue to work on the region-wide plan, working with the district councils, district and city councils as well. There's some positive stuff happening there, and together with the broader Just Transition program that's happening in Southland. We also think the council can play that leadership role in terms of reducing its own in-house emissions. So greater uptake of EVs, now that the government's making them cheaper as well, it's ideal time to invest in that, and providing things like low interest loans for people to have, less reliance on polluting heat sources and whatnot as well. The other thing I would encourage the council to really look at is how it can provide more public transport and ability for people to move around the region in a more climate friendly way. Because one of the reasons why we focus on this as Forest and Bird is that the impact on climate change can have devastating effects on our Indigenous biodiversity, and solving it can also help promote Indigenous biodiversity as well. And on that, we note that the Climate Commission's really highlighted that we can't plant our way out of the climate emergency that we're in, and has really put a strong emphasis on encouraging permanent Indigenous forests, because over the longer term, they sequester far more carbon and store far more carbon as well. And one of the probably the best things we could be doing is seeing how we can protect the existing forests that we've got, and ensure that they have a greater ability to suck up that carbon and store it over the centuries that we need it there for. So on that, Forest and Birds recently released a report that highlights the impact of browsing predators on our Indigenous forests. And this really highlights the need to not only focus on those possums, stoats and rats that we often do in predator control, but also looking at browsing predators such as deer and goats as well, because they really destroy the understory and have a significant impact on the ability of those forests to lock up the carbon. So in terms of where the council is looking at its spend on biosecurity and biodiversity, it's pleasing to see the boost for pest management, and again encourage that broader view of what pests we're targeting in that. Finally, all of this does cost money, so we would encourage the option one in terms of where rates increases are looking at. It is a really critical time to fund this work. We're facing a dual biodiversity and climate crisis, and we have highly degraded rivers in Southland. So it's really important to do that. And just coming back to climate change for a second there, there's more and more evidence coming out of the importance of peat wetlands. And Southland is one of the regions that's lost the most, one of the highest rates of loss of wetlands. And that's the critical bits to store and suck up carbon, as well as providing really good habitats as well. So I encourage what we can do to protect those places. And finally, all the work that we put into ensuring that these plans are good and our bylaws are good doesn't mean much unless they're properly enforced. So we're pleased to see that there is some increase to the regulatory function, and we would encourage more funding going into that area to ensure that there is really good compliance monitoring and enforcement, and adopting measures such as remote sensing, using all the good LiDAR data that we've now got, and seeing how that can, making sure that people are all following the rules, so that benefits everyone. Cool, that's about it from me. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Rick. I've got questions from Eric, Roy first, then Robert, then David. Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Rick, for your considered submission. Appreciate it. Just a small point. I'm looking at paragraph 29 on page 4 of your written submission. You encourage us to get involved in implementing a wallaby eradication strategy. Have we got wallabies in our roadie?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Sorry, that may have been an error on my part, having done similar submissions in the Otago region.
Okay.
So yes, as far as I know,
if you are aware of them, please let us know. And we'll
I will do. That would be very unfortunate if they come that far south.
Robert.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Rick. How are you?
Not so bad. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. I was interested in your mention of mitigation with regard to climate change and rivers and the work in the headlands and so on. I'm just wondering, do you have a good source of information, or do you know of an exemplar somewhere that this council might use, access to move forward on that particular approach to climate change mitigation?
Thanks, Robert. I can't think of a really good exemplar off the top of my head, and it's something that I think all the councils around the country are needing to focus on more. But we know that looking after our rivers, protecting those headwater source areas has so many benefits, from improving the water quality to improving the water yield, as well as reducing those flooding flows as well. And where we see, there are some studies I know from that have been done up around, I think in the Mackenzie area, showing, restoring tussock lands, for example, helps increase the water yield in those areas, as well as tussocks being a really good carbon store as well. But I can have a look into it and see if I can find any examples to share with the council.
Thanks, and perhaps we might have to become that exemplar.
Exactly.
I've got David.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Rick. Just a query actually under bullet point 20. The planning provision to give rivers more room to take their natural floodplains rather than what we've got now. I'd be very interested in just your thoughts on that, how that can be achieved, because we have looked at it.
Yeah, so I think this is looking at an evolution in how we do river management, and the recent floods in Canterbury really highlight the importance of this, of where the river systems are quite different between the regions, but where we allow those rivers more room to flow, to take more natural paths, that generally will slow down the rate of flows, such that it doesn't lead to larger flooding events, and planting out those rivers as well. Currently, I'm aware in Southland, like the current management is very focused on the straight channels that are dug up, and riverbanks that don't have riparian strips as well. So I think it's just shifting away from that provides habitat for our fish and birds as well along those areas.
Final question, Jeremy.
Yep, hi Rick, I am here. I don't know what I'm from video. Just a quick question in regards to you were talking about regulatory presence and not relying solely on industry-led farm management plans. You do support management plans, though, I take it.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any reason not to do farm management plans. I think where it becomes an issue is where we solely rely on farm management plans. So it makes sense to do farm management plans. It makes sense to do integrated catchment management plans. The trouble that we see in some of the plans is where it solely relies on that, and the council kind of hamstrings its ability to see, are those plans actually effective in achieving the outcomes that are desired for the region.
Thanks for coming on board and submitting today, Rick. We will consider all submissions during the deliberations, and you will be informed of the results in due course. So thanks very much for coming.
No worries, good luck with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Right, next up, we have a vacancy, but we've got a vacancy. We've got seats here. Right. Well, then we'll call up David Rose and Chris Dillon if you're happy to come slightly earlier than planned. That will be very good. Welcome. And we're aware you have 10 minutes, and we'll have read the written submission, but I guess up to you how you split it up, but I want to summarise the main points and leave some time for questions. But the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Chris Dillon, just newly elected as Provincial President of Southland Federated Farmers. With me is a life member of Federated Farmers, Dave Rose. I take it everyone's read through our submission. This whole process is fairly new to me, and reading that document at the start was quite a task and quite daunting, and took quite a bit of understanding. And yeah, from some of what we saw in it, I hate to say that I think some people in this room didn't understand a lot of it. To our submission there, the overarching challenge being presented in this consultation document is the proposed rates increase of either 16 or 20%. Given the enormity of this increase, it is disappointing that the consultation document offers a minimal number of options, choices or information. The supporting document on levels of service notes an aspiration that ensuring value for money for the community relies on the council making sound financial decisions, and the community having input into these activities should be undertaken and how they should be funded. It is hard to see how this document has met the aspirations that's been presented. We've come up with some recommendations there. They're in front of you. I'm not going to read them all out, but number 3 is important. We do not support the proposed 20% increase. And number 4, we do not support the proposed 16% increase. Number 5 there, that the council looks to fund operational savings and allow rates increases to remain in line with local government cost index throughout the long-term plan. I'll skip to number 8, that the council maximises the UAGC, so it's fair across the board. And number 9 is very important also, the council reduced the associated levels of service during the marine fees are reduced due to the low cruise numbers. That, to me, seems to be one of the major reasons for the rise in rates. So that definitely needs to be looked at. And number 11 there, that the council holds its rates increase until 2022-2023, when a more transparent, engaging consultation process can be undertaken.
Oh, well, I'll follow on from Chris and just make some comments. So you see we've got a thing there around using more debt. You've got the ability to do so. Things like the shovel-ready project should be spread over the lifetime of those things, not have big lumps come through on rates. Got a good comment there around, and this is a large problem we have with the document. So, very little information, no information provided on how the council could have cut its expenditure or overheads to meet the current income. The level of service document provided highlights the development of a series of new plans and documents, but again does not demonstrate a commitment to improving services and community outcomes by an additional 20%. So you're asking for 20%. We had a consultant, someone that wasn't from Kim didn't do it, it was another person. And the interesting thing was, before I went to the consultation meetings, which were very hard to find actually because they were hardly advertised, but I managed to get to one. His basic question was 20%, 16%, why do they need it? What are they going to use it for? And that was a big question. Just from someone outside looking at it, it was really interesting. And so, again, asking for an increase way above the cost, the local government index. We've got some rate samples in there, and I guess the thing that shows is, although farmers' rates are rising at a lesser amount than some, the quantum is massive. Indeed, many times more than what the average urban. So I noted that the City Council is talking about increases of a percentage, but their quantum is much larger and ongoing. We've also got a comment in here, so around the increases. So Federated Farmers has seen various reasons indicated as to why the 20% rate rise is needed. However, these not been consistent with the documents provided. We wonder how much information has been provided to you, elected councillors, to make the decisions. Are we funding a loss of cruise ship revenue, debt repayments, or government policy? To what extent are these issues requiring further revenue to achieve what purpose? None of this is clear and comprehensive from the documents provided. And so it saddens me to basically say that we often come round here and sometimes you go, well, that was well done, we understood it, we could consult on it, give you your opinion. You might get an A, you might get an A minus, you might only get a C. This document's an F. It's a fail. The consultation, is the way it's been put, is a fail. And I see in here there's a staff comment around the legal requirements. And so we're not coming here to be destructive or to be highly negative, although we are really disappointed with the document. We're actually, where the staff have said that, you're bound by legal requirements. That's a good thing about a federation like Federated Farmers. We asked our policy head to come up with something better. And the better thing was ECAN and Tasman. much more numbers, and this thing in the first half is, there's no numbers, there's not much detail. You want to look at the ECAN one, it's full of numbers. Even the stuff behind, you tap on them, it's got funding policy, it's got it all sitting there. It's a much better consultation document. So there is another way to do it and still meet the legal requirements. So I think that's a point that we need to make. And actually, as well as that, it was also interesting that ECAN was looking for large increases, 24 and 18%, and they finished up at 12. So, information for councillors to look at, a whole lot of good submissions, and you end up in a place where everybody's a bit happier. And we'd like to think that might happen here as well, given the quantum of what's being asked for. Another thing in here we must highlight is the general rate. So, you're talking about 16 and 20, but the general rate's gone up by 33. And the urban rate's gone up by around 20. So I'm not sure how that lands. It's unclear why that's the case. But 33% is a large rise in general rates. And that's why we call for the uniform annual general charge, because if it is about general things that you can't nail down, you can't have in a targeted rate, then obviously that's the place for it, is the uniform annual general charge. And that's only sitting at 22% and could be put up to 30%. Again, as a smaller farmer, I pay $4,500 to Environment Southland, so it's not like farmers aren't paying rates. Chris next to me is paying $15,000, so we're big ratepayers actually in the quantum. Waituna was the one thing in here that was well done. There were 4 options. Our farmers looked at it and we've come up with option 1. That was something that was well done. And then we get to the marine fees. And it's really hard to know how you run a business that relies on foreign tourists going in and out of Milford Sound to the state of 2.7 million without a plan B. But we came out of this thing about the marine fees trying to understand how that was put together. And, we didn't just read the consultation document. I did talk to your financial team. And the thing that I was given was the 2018 LTP. And there is a much better breakdown of where it's gone. I don't understand why there wasn't one for this to say, here's the 2.7 million, here's the areas that we think are high priority that have got to go ahead, here's the things that we haven't got the income that we're going to put on hold, so that it will give us a clear steer, but that hasn't happened. So seemingly all essential, and I find that hard. We've got no idea when the cruise ships will return, so there's clearly a need to consult better. We're saying you need to do it again next year. We're in uncertain times. You need to come back to us. And so the one thing was the general cruise ship is the main area of needing extra money. The other thing was around the general policy cost. And I'm talking to a lot of people in ES. One of your senior staff members mentioned the comment that they hope they'd allowed enough. And I don't know what that means, but it doesn't give you faith about how much it is and where it's targeted and how it's going to land. But I guess I'll just make the plea, plead with you as councillors. You represent the ratepayers. You represent, if you come to us wanting increases that cannot be quantified, then you need to think about who you represent. You need to think about, are you representing the ratepayer, or has unfortunately Environment Southland became another taxation arm of government?
Yeah, no, reiterate that last point that Dave made there. Has there been any pushback on any of this stuff with the government? Because as we've highlighted, there's nothing there to say where these increases are going to. We're in a time of in farming, people should be able to be enjoying what's going on. There's a huge level of uncertainty out there. Anxiety, there's mental problems. all because everyone's running around looking over their shoulder, worried about who's looking in. There's no certainty. There's no where the goalpost, where it's going to be, where it's going to land. This document doesn't provide any more certainty. And yeah, that's the point. Like, we need to get rid of this anxiousness. People need to be able to get on and enjoy farming, because farming's all Southland's got, I'm afraid.
Well, a few quick questions. I'll start myself. The second time I've heard this 33% rise, and I'm having difficulty getting my head around it. It was also mentioned that our expenditure's gone up by 24.5%, I think, 3.8 million more expenditure. We've lost 2.8 from the cruise ships. But we'll have a look and come back to you, obviously, but the 33%, I think is mystifying all of us as to where that's come from. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There's not a problem. If you do the maths, if you go into the general rate and where it's heading, you do the maths, it's 33.7%. It's clearly indicated in their submission, and indeed there's a snapshot of the documentation in there. So it's going from here, sorry, a couple of pages. Yeah, so the general rate's going from 10,764,000 to 14,393,000. That's from this last year to 21-22. So that's where the 33.7% comes from. Yeah, it's normally what used to happen is that rate rises were about the general rate. You seemingly changed that trend to being overall increase. Very proud to be involved with one of your liaison committees, and it hasn't got any increase. That's why the overall increase is much less than the 33, because they've done a good job of sticking within their budget. But yeah, that's where it comes from.
Any further questions? Jill?
Just a quick one. 2016, so you got a consultant went over. What was the figure? We must have come up with a figure then if you said no to the other two.
Well, what we're saying is that we want you to go back and have another look through to come up. Like ECAN, they wanted 24 and 18 and finished up with the 12% increase. So, like your own business, Jeremy, if you had, I guess, the cruise ship thing that you talk about, it's in your document a lot, but there's not a lot of other numbers, 2.7 million come out, then you actually say, well, what's essential, what can we put on hold, what can wait till the cruise ships come back, whatever, you cut your cloth. We're not a bottomless pit, and I think the thing that Chris has tried to highlight is that the elephant in the room with farming, many farmers are fearful of where their farming business is going. With the sort of tweaks that could come through Len and through the limit setting process, they might not even have a business in 5 years. So those uncertainties are massive, and to put rate rises in there without any clear thing of where it's going or how it's prioritised, it beggars belief, really.
I think our time is about up, so look, thank you for coming in and submitting today. We will consider all submissions during the deliberations, and you will be informed of the final decision. So thank you for coming in and submitting today.
Thank you for your time.
So I'll stand up and do a twirl and then I'll carry on with it.
Welcome back, David. Welcome back.
Okay. The Ready Catchment Liaison Committee, and let's start on a positive thing. We'll change tack a little, and we'll go. Recently had a meeting the other day looking at flooding, and it was particularly good to see that although our reserves, our running account's going to be down by 300k, that the flood that came through last February looks like we're right up to speed. And we haven't had to dip into reserves, and we've done a considerable amount of work, and your team have done a really good job in the Riverworks section, looking after the rivers, consulting with us, doing the job. So really proud of that, and
yeah, it's a great place to be with the second largest flood in sort of the last 20 odd years coming through, and it was quite big actually. The reason for the submission, it followed our AGM, it followed some emails I sent out talking to a lot of their members, and it is again coming back to the Shovel Ready Fund. So there is Lake Hawkins, and if Lake Hawkins, if the pumps were turned off, Lake Hawkins would return to the airport. And so we struggle, so when you're looking for places to get the money for the local share, for the pumps, then we struggle to see how the already catchment ratepayers, the sole, we should take funding. And again, this document's a bit confusing because in one place it talks about loans, and in another place there's a graph that has grants. I believe it's a grant. I'm talking to Jeremy because I had that confirmed. That's what you were looking at doing. So, we're in opposition to a grant. It's a Southland. The two big comments are these pumps are predominantly for keeping the airport open, and as such should be funded across Southland as it is a whole of Southland resource, not just already catchment ratepayers. And a simple funding policy principles of the beneficiary should pay means that Southland benefits from the airport, therefore all Southlanders should pay. Now there is a comment from the staff saying that it is in their catchment. The other comment is they're F-class ratepayers, and they are, but F-class is indirect benefit. Indirect benefit, looking after the flood banking and the associated culverts and floodgates and all that stuff. It's not about pumps, guys. It's just not about that. So I guess that's our plea. Our plea is also, we're open that you have to get the money from somewhere. We're open to lend it, but we don't want to take it. And just yesterday we had a meeting with Jeremy and Nicole about this, and we are only too happy for those lease reserves to be. We can think more laterally about it. There is a big problem at Wallistown, and we actually think that we could help seeding some capital to get that underway as a loan. So we're open to thinking about this if you consult with us on this. But to take that out of there and use it for the airport, everybody I've had come back says, no, we can lend it, but it can't be taken. So that's our submission.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David? Jeremy?
I'm trying to work out a question for you before I start debating. But I suppose, and then I thought, are you happier after yesterday's discussion?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I thought we had a good discussion. We're going to revamp the guidelines. I haven't got it to you. I have got those papers with me, by the way. But I just was getting ready for today, Jeremy. It was a bit quick.
Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, David, for that. I liked your comment just again, open for thinking.
Yeah.
And I'm just reading in here, the feedback reinforced the opinion at our AGM that the lease reserves should not be taken for funding shovel-ready projects. So, shovel-ready, in my understanding, is a lot of it to do with now is long-term legacy effects around climate change going well into the future. So do you think those two things should be separate as a part, so funding from the catchment and funding shovel-ready projects? Do you not see them one and the same?
Well, I guess what initially prompted the thing, I came to a presentation here prior to it even being, you decided to go ahead with it. And it is primarily about the Lake Hawkins pumps, because if you look at the beneficiaries, it's pretty clear to see that the already catchment ratepayers aren't the only ones that use the airport. So primarily around that. Because we just see that as wrong. But we're open. I think we made that comment yesterday. Jeremy we're open to perhaps having a clause in the lease reserves where it can be used a bit wider with consultation with us. But generally should be used within the catchment. So we've even left that door slightly open. And the last thing you want to do is not have something that's flexible. So we've also, in the comments that we've got to that policy, tried to make it even more flexible, because otherwise there's not much point coming up with a policy in 2 or 3 years down the track, isn't it?
Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kia ora, David. Just wondering if you can explain to me what your intention for the long-term accumulation of surplus funds is. Are you intending that there will be a continued accumulation in that fund, or are you intending on setting a ceiling so that you've got a safety net, and then what happens above that? What's the committee's intention in that space?
Well, we've initially our first intention was that it could not be taken and used wherever council felt like, which was in the guidelines. So we've made some changes that we're going to give to Jeremy that he can pass for the rest of us to look at. As far as what it can be used for, we've never really, apart from the little bit that came into our running account, which was what we were paying the mortgage on that lease land, and it ended up coming, because we always were told that once that was paid, it would become a revenue item in our account, and I have actually sourced those comments. They came from 2005. One of my old reports as liaison chairman has all that documented, luckily enough. So that's where that came from. So we've never really thought of it as a source to spend in any other areas. We went through this capacity building project last year where you've widened our scope if we want to. So now we can think of doing it, using it in other areas we've never previously been able to think like that.
So you're quite happy to keep accumulating money in that space?
Well, we're quite happy as things come up to consider them where we've never even considered using it. It's been primarily to maintain for capital improvements and maintenance of those lease areas, and it has accumulated a lot. So we're open to that discussion, thinking about the projects where it could be used. The one thing that we were struggling with yesterday, and it's something, is around the disaster and how much you need in there, and we wanted a feeling on that and how that would apply, whether it was so much per catchment or whether it was a bulk amount, and if there was an event, how that could be drawn down so that that's the base left there, and over and above that could be used. So we need to understand that too, don't we?
Yes, thank you.
Just quickly clarify, my name's getting mentioned this. I was acting on behalf of the Property Working Party. It's not just Jeremy. I just said I'm chair of the Working Party, just for people wondering and listening, and that's all.
We'll report back to council.
Yeah, we'll report back to council at the meeting tomorrow.
Thanks for coming in, and actually that meeting was a good example of the consultation we do try to do with groups to solve issues. So thanks for submitting today, David, and all submitters will get some answers when we go through the deliberations, and we'll look at all submissions. So thanks very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
My understanding we're adjourning now, and come back next week to look at those submitters that aren't coming in, but yeah.
Can we just have a wee debrief on one or two key items that I'd like our staff to have a look at before we come next week? So probably we can do that.
Perhaps we want to have a cup of tea and we'll come back in and give some feedback.
I don't think it's a public forum that will do that, because we're...
Let's have a cup of tea and then close the meeting. Cup of tea.
Yeah.
Okay. Adjourn.
Okay,
We'll resume next week.
Yep. adjourn. We will adjourn the meeting.
I don't need any more coffee or I'll be hot.
So if you're happy with that, Eric.
Yeah, well, I think there's a discrepancy between two of the submissions about percentage, and so we had sort of Doug Fraser and Federated Farmers giving us a percentage of what the rural sector's going to be increased, and then we had Claire Hadley giving us the completely opposite deflection that we're only paying 12 to 14% in the rural compared to 30% in town. Now those two figures don't match up, so can we get someone to just run a comb over that and just see how accurately we've reflected it and which one is right, because I think that's quite important.
No, I think that is very important, and I think people have grasped the figure that we need to provide some real clarity about, and I guess what we probably have done over the last couple of years is focused on the overall increase, because the general rate does move around, but we need to be able to put out figures to show people, and I think that's feedback we all want.
Clarify that. They're talking about the general rates. They're not talking about the whole rates. Which would be closer to the 20%. Is that correct? Like he's talking about the general rates probably has gone up 30% obviously on those figures. And that affects everyone. So it's not the whole rates, like a whole rates bill. It's one part of the rates. Does everybody
it's been quite a selective statement that was made.
But they are correct, it might have gone up, it probably has gone up 33%.
I think that's potentially true.
That's the figures that they've got, so there's nothing.
We can provide clarification.
And it's fine for you.
A lot of people don't get mixed up, oh, my rates is going to go up 33%, which is not right.
The 20% rate increase is total rates.
Yeah.
Eric.
Yeah, I've got another one. I'm probably a bit singed by the inferences that have been made that we haven't reflected on priorities. After 17 days of workshops, we need to somehow dispel that, because if that gets legs out there, I just think that's unfortunate. A big enough shoulder to take the criticism, but if it's not accurate, we don't want misinformation getting out there. The other thing is that I'm wondering if we haven't informed the public as well as we should have about that. All of that stuff that we've been criticised for not putting out there has been on our website. We've provided, to my knowledge, everything that we've had to provide by law and that we've done every other year. And so we've probably not made that as clear as we should have, but it's certainly been available. And I think we need to clear up that we short-circuited it, because the inference is that we're probably hiding something, or that will get legs that that's the case. So I'm not sure how we actually get that back into the public, that the stuff is there, but you're just not looking in the right place.
And several years ago, when the edict came down from on high, that you'll only put this stuff, I wasn't that happy about it, because I've always felt give people more information, but we can clarify some of that stuff too, which I think is important. We will know.
So what I can say, Councillor, is correct. That feedback came back to us earlier during the consultation process. I was concerned about that too, but we provided exactly the same information that we provided in previous years. The breakdown of the budgets are against every one of the levels of service. Funding impact statements are there, and the financial strategy is there. Our levels of service are actually based on the direct category levels of service we make as well, so I was interested in that feedback also. That's all I can say. I looked at the last
Can
one.
we just check that it's as visible as we think it is?
I was online looking at our website when David was talking to see what was available, and it's all there.
So you can click on the actual,
and not just in a big lump, it's all itemised and it's all really clear. So I nearly asked them what they were reading, because they did not.
The only thing that I can say, councillors, is that the only thing that we did differently this time is we did not print all of those background papers out and provide them as a printed document. And we saved a significant amount of money by not printing. But that's the only thing that's different.
They can have, do they have more detail, or are they just?
Well, I'm not certain exactly what he's referring to in terms of the way that we actually set out the levels of service and funding statements exactly based on their format.
Again, it was just a little snapshot. My understanding is they're 12% as a sort of ongoing annual increase. They haven't dealt with it like we've dealt with it.
And the funding from debt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, which we got some very good reasons not to do.
Now, I've got Peter, but I think probably we need to do this in a structured way so we go through everything so we don't miss anything, but that's, we'll start at the top of Peter.
I just wanted to, about the Federated Farmers thing, look, I understand in farming now, it's the times that we're in. Their members are saying, we want you to bite back and push back, so we probably saw a bit of pushing back quite strongly than we normally see here today, but just, there was some real positive stuff that comes through, especially around, I got it quite clear around working together and our regional leadership and priorities around stuff like that and community resilience. So I thought that was really positive.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Nicole. Just, I've talked to Jeremy about it, we've had a discussion before, but we do need some real clarification around that, who owns that money from the lease land. To me, there seems to be a difference between some of the different catchment areas, liaison groups, and David. They're still heading in a direction I thought was solved, if you like. So that was an area that certainly.
And I think some of that will cover when that committee comes back, because I was there for part of the meeting. The facts are government put up on average 75%, and they didn't ask for the money back, so it's not all belonging to those groups. But let's wait for that meeting. Rob, do you want to make a comment?
I was just going to say the same thing. It'll be covered in that report back, and we can make sure we expand on those areas just to talk about ownership and the background to it. This is a council reserve, full stop. So it's
We own the land, we care enough. But as I say, that you need to work with the community.
That's right.
Because if they think they might have a wee bit of ownership, it's going to be very hard. Like some interesting meetings, and at the end of the day, it's there to be used. They want to use it in the catchment, and you can use it too. So.
But look, having a degree of ownership and interest from those groups is also healthy, and I think we'll work with that in a really good way, I think, going forward. But we'll start back up with Doug Fraser, and we'll just work down the list. Is there anything, a lot of his issues are the same as Federated Farmers. Is there anything else we want staff to bring more information back from Doug's? Lloyd.
Eric probably covered a little bit earlier on, but there was made mention on at least 3 of them of using the UHGC a bit more in a different way. I'm not sure whether we can, at this late stage in a long-term plan, how flexible we are about rearranging the deck chairs on those general rate UHC stuff. So I'm interested in the comments, but I'm not too sure how much flexibility we've got.
And adjust the UHC each year.
Stu, are we deliberating at this point? I thought we were looking to.
We're actually looking for anything you want more information on rather than deliberating. Good point.
Just Mr. Chairman, just the rough fallout, Ali brought it up, and I just wondered where we are with that. This it also came through with his comment as to where are we with that? That's just
That's something we want more information on. I don't know, the loss of the food funding is a factor, but we need an answer for those people, so it's something
We'll just clarify, perhaps, Chairman, who's actually managing that? Is it City Council, because it's City Council land? Or we're partners in it, but have we got any management role?
So we've put some funding into the slipway, and it was a partnership approach. ICC is managing.
That's what I understood.
And the proposal was to have an adjoining area as a slipway. And I think we're covering that in a workshop next week, I think, from memory. Looking down the back to see if it's right. We've got a workshop on this matter. Is that right, Jan, or not? Okay, well, maybe not. So that's, but we can come back with some advice on that. Yeah.
So, in terms of providing our staff with some direction for pages to come back, can I suggest perhaps we just turn the pages quickly on the individual submissions and ask you if there is additional information that's additional to the commentary that's already there, or that you would like from us, or any additional information. So I think I'm unclear on Mr Fraser's requests, I think, in relation to your points in terms of submission 41. Was there anything in addition to this that you'd like? The paper that we bring back to the deliberation has staff recommendations and that, so we need to present there what we'd like to see that's come forward.
So we talked about the targeted rates, and we've got slides that we've seen during the process, which we may want to look at again, just to say that we've covered those the points. Is there anything else under that one that we?
He was asking about those IT costs and whether the relevance they had to rural sector or to farming. And we know where it's largely the updating where a consent system sits, and that does have degree of relevance to farming.
It's not totally though. We're working on an app that will be probably for the winter grazing, which will probably be taken up by other areas. So that's something I think that actually farmers would say, well, actually yes, that's something we might want to bring back because it's being trialled at the moment.
Yeah, but the main IT spend is an update of where our consent system sits, isn't it? And that's
broader than that.
Broader than that.
But consent is a key part of it. Consent compliance.
Yes,
so there's very much relevance to the rules.
So we're still discussing 31.
Yeah, that was Doug Fraser's comment. Like he was asking, well, why is that IT money? What's relevant to that IT money to farming?
That's fine. I've captured that here too. Thank you. In relation to 41, if we're done with 41, is that?
Jean Campbell, right, keep going. Kathy Holmes, anything under?
So sorry, we're at 32.
That's the Kai Collective, yeah.
Kai Collective, yeah.
Question maybe, the staff commentary is suggesting in-kind support. I'm just wondering if it's possible to put cost figure around that kind of support. Because actually there's quite a few submissions that I guess we would be offering in-kind support, but it's quite hard to quantify how much that's actually going to cost us. And whether it might need a extra resource in a department or other. Is that one? Yeah. I'm not sure whether I'm even in the right space to ask that question.
Yeah, I think it's unclear what the scope of this would be until we talk to them in more detail in terms of what kind of in-kind, but I wouldn't expect that this would result in this amount.
Okay.
This is part of a bigger issue, and it's health and resilience. We've actually seen that in the last 2 years we've probably been cut off, or possibly cut off 2 to 3 times, and the likelihood is that's going to happen going forward again. This is about being self-sufficient, but I understand it, it's the community being able to last days, if not weeks, with limited inputs. So it's probably got some merit to actually help that process and help people understand what they can do and not just go to the supermarket.
In terms of coming back to you next week though, being able to quantify what the amount of time would be.
Well, I think we need to follow up.
Yes, I think it just will be hard to scope that between now and then. I don't think we'll be huge amount of money.
No, it's just, and perhaps in isolation, no, but there's an increasing number of projects that people are asking for our support.
Yes, I understand.
And so that in-kind support does end up costing us, and I'm just wondering
what does it look like?
How much that might be and where we would see that cost. could be.
We'll see if we can expand our commentary for you next week.
Even as simple as the opportunity for website support. I mean, should we be hosting some information that's relevant to that group? Who's responsible for hosting that information?
Maybe we write informative articles for our website.
But even that, Alan, is a staff cost, isn't it? So,
Yeah, appreciate that, but again, that's it's not the big staff cost, but we've got a lot of information on the rural sector and on the oceans, and what about a little bit of domestic help for sustainability and resilience?
There was a number of direct questions submitters asked us, will that be captured for the staff going forward, or you want us basically just to, and us to just do things, we want more information for deliberations. There was things like, how do you test the air and all those sort of things. I'm assuming we've captured all that, and we will do that in the final, reporting back.
It's just where you want additional information.
Yeah. So we've got Lloyd, then David.
And several of the staff responses have been that Environment Southland's intending a different approach to grant funding arrangements in the past years. I just wonder if we have some information about what that grant funding is going to be like, because people are asking for money, and we've said we're going to have a different approach. What we got some information about.
Specifically about the EEF, I think.
So this relates to the biodiversity funding that we've got from government, and so we've got additional funding, and we just need to look at our criteria for how we allocate it. That decision hasn't been made yet. So it's still, we're still looking, and we'll come back to you at some stage when it's clear.
So we can just expand maybe a little bit in the note about it, so that it's clear for you.
Yeah. Is that what you're looking for?
Sort of, but if someone says, well, you've been giving us $3,000 a year for a project, can we carry on? And the response is, well, we're looking at a different approach. So they probably want some assurance that things carry on under the present regime before the different approaches.
So we can come back to you with timeframes for when the change is going to come in place. I'm reluctant to. So that would be the best way of doing it.
So we'll bring back more information on the 29th. You can
around the process.
Discuss this in detail and decide, so, for submission 16, what you want to do about that.
David.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I wonder whether some of the stuff should be discussed in our deliberations. There's been a number of submissions regards money and support, and I just wonder whether it's in our mandate actually to do some of that. So I think it needs to be discussed at that time, because it's news to me if we have been supporting some of these things, and in some cases, so I think we need to discuss that.
Over the years, there have been a number of grants that have been through the annual plan or the.
And those grants, just following on from the chair, those grants would have been approved probably during the last LTP conversations. Certainly the circuit one was.
So we didn't hear directly from the water safety today, but they we had this submission. I see anything that you saw here and that you'd like any further commentary on? Submission 16 of voting point, Councillor Esler, so that's related to that also. Is there anything else in relation to that one? You need further information on?
Their background, they know that we've been appointed, we've been supporting the Rehura Community Trust Pest Management Program in the past. We've made grants to them. I'm not sure whether it's an annual basis or I think it was, wasn't it? So that'd be where they're coming from, that they say, well, that group over there is getting funding for something that we're doing as well, so we want some money. Yeah, goes back to that, your response before. But
yeah, I've noted
yeah.
that. Item 40, would you like any further information on that?
I know a little bit better about some of that group. I think Glendale probably does too, but their focus seems to be on developing the estuary rather than our focus, which is cleaning it up. The rugby club members are absolutely committed to having a hotel down there and walling off the dump and doing development work, which is not what we want.
So in terms of any further information that you'd like on the staff recommendation, is there anything additional to?
The new Rotary History Group is not linked to the Rotary directly.
Well, the club members are in it. That's all. That's what they talk about. I would hear them talking about cleaning up the history, which is what we should be focusing on.
Yeah. I've been part of the new Rotary History working group for a while and haven't seen any of that talk. I know they've got their report that's due to come out and they want to release that at some stage, but I haven't really thought about any commercialisation of it.
Well, they've got plans and diagrams and everything all around.
We're probably getting to a lower level.
Can we go through the paper so that we've got direction? I think that would be really great.
We do need something where we talked about doing some testing and everything on, just coming back to us how that's going to happen too.
Yeah, so as we discussed, I'll come back to you with early thinking around what we can do in that space.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, sorry,
Jeremy.
no, we're just talking about another, doing some testing down there. I've said, this is
Probably a linkage there with Claire Hadley's comment about they're still looking at the science or conducting some science, so those two things probably link in, but that's probably not going to be in time for
We should
submissions.
probably refer to the ICC's comment on the submission themselves, which they've commented they're going to work with us. So I'll show that. So. Okay, Chris Henderson, is there anything in particular that we didn't cover here that you would like?
Sorry, which one are you in?
So we're now at number 34, Chris Henderson.
How much would it cost to put the trains back to Invercargill and Christchurch on next Monday, please?
Transport committee.
Oh, right, okay.
Tracks are there. Just put something on them.
A nice thought, but maybe a while away.
Investigating the Waiau River before the decision's made on where that pair goes. That was part of the submission, wasn't it? And no large tree planting in the upper
Yeah,
catchment.
other catchment work, I don't know, that's one area that's concerning.
So would you like some information on those things or what are you looking for?
No.
No? I'll just
Is it going to affect your deliberations? I guess that's the focus. Some of these things we will follow up on other forums.
LGP things.
Some of the stuff's outside of.
yes. These are big issues they're raising and they'll be dealt with at some stage in the right forum.
But we just need to make sure that you have the right information for your deliberations on Tuesday. So if there's anything else that you need, submit a 14, Stewart Island Rugby.
Yeah, I'd like to know what we've been doing and whether there's some kind of expectation or commitment for us to keep doing.
So again, that would come back through the same process we've talked about before.
Yeah.
You want to ask them whether they wanted it continued, and she said for 2 years. At least.
What commitment have we made?
The big question there was, we've got shovel-ready money, how do we sustain something at the end of it? I think it's probably the biggest point.
Yeah.
So just be clear that the funding is for the previous LTP period. So that's, okay, thank you. In relation to submitted 12 Field and Marine Guardians.
Finding a way to continue on with the coastal work and probably do those things don't fall by the wayside.
Call out facilities.
Let's talk about a plan change, but it's probably not for deliberations, but it's certainly something to be on the radar, wasn't it?
So we've discussed that in the feedback currently. Is there anything else that's not there about the process that you need commentary on?
Was she correct in saying that the applications that have come forward, certainly the applications that have come forward for activity in the coastal marine area have wanted more opportunity for them, but I think in the consents that I've read, they've been turned down. So I don't know whether the existing plan isn't tough enough to be able to turn down applications for further intensity or for further activity. Because I think
We've got a workshop scheduled on this topic.
yeah, but I think there is obviously enough teeth to a point to turn back applications where people want to have more activity.
Yeah, underlying plan, but still a plan in place.
Yeah, she wants us to get cracking on the new plan.
Yeah, I know, but there's still one there that's operating.
So this will be covered in the workshop in a couple of weeks' time on the coastal plan, the scope of it and some of the rationale behind it, which I think will explain some of these issues that have been raised.
Recognised.
Just note that Nathan Rose suggested twice that we should stop doing work over in Fiordland until we've got the cruise ships back. That would really be a backward step. Continue with the work that we're already doing. Pausing it for 2 or 3 years is actually going to be really unhelpful. I can see his point of view, but it's not realistic.
Are we still on? So we're now moving on to 27, and there's any more comments on the Wendy, your dates,
No, I don't need any more information.
What's my only question really was, we've obviously monitored Ayr and Invercargill, Winton, Gore, Mataura, but how do we get asked to look beyond those towns? At what point would we go beyond those 4 centres?
Well, we do, and that's probably part of our answer, actually, like we have monitored Winton. I'm not sure whether we've done nightcaps, but we've got the standard ones, but I'm pretty sure we've still got a process of going and looking somewhere else, possibly for a couple of years, to see whether they're coming close to an issue or not. But that's more in the answer, I guess.
just so we can add a bit of commentary about that.
Yeah, I was just wanting to know whether the cows out there would make no mud too, so. Something made 1.7 cows, I think I worked it. Systems in the past that have worked. Sorry, just.
I trust council won't be upset if we don't come back with that, yes.
Keep going, man's got cows to feed.
I'll be disappointed if I haven't got a background information on that for you. Anything else in relation to the Invercargill City Council submission, apart from the matter that Councillor Baird raised earlier in the day, which I've noted in relation to the rates increase explanation?
Maybe some clarity on that next paragraph is the charges for consents. It looks like there's one cost and then it goes to 2. I'd just like a little bit more background
Yeah, I
into
think we
that.
can be clearer on that commentary. I agree with you, so I think we'll.
And I don't know what the total costs are, because that will be relative to total costs possibly as well, so it's just not clear by the.
No, I concur. So we will make that clearer. It relates to the size of the payment of the deposit rather than the total.
Also the increased incident cost recovery charges. I'm not sure I'm completely clear on that, but maybe it's just me.
We did decide to increase our charges.
Yes, I know, but
Discussion.
when the suggestion is that we're ultra vires, I just want to make sure I understand. I'm not sure whether we.
I think it was a good sign for me that the Chief Executive of the ICC made time to come along and talk to us about working together in the future, and opposed to working closely together, so that was really positive.
Okay, I've got the legal opinion, so I can expand the information at the front end of the response.
The Health Board.
No.
Keep going.
The SPCA.
The staff comment was we had ceased funding activities out in the rural areas because there wasn't enough uptake for it.
Specifically on Raki project.
So we did a project on Stuart Old, but it just, the staff comment was we'd stopped doing it.
Yes.
Do we need to reconsider that?
More TLA than us.
It is.
Yeah.
Do you need any additional information on that? I mean, the board can deliberate that next.
Do you think that they would have an MOU that they've sort of got in the drawer, or have they already sort of, what's it going to look like if they were sort of going to put an MOU together? Is it a blank page, or has it got some writing on it, do you think?
Is it an LTP issue?
Well, I don't know, we can quantify how much it might be going to cost us if we say yes to an MOU with them. Is it going to be a $50,000 exercise or a $500,000?
We haven't seen it yet, so we can't.
I mean, do we, if we,
Cats and dogs don't come up in our pest management strategy.
they don't.
We only have the information that they provided us.
I keep on paying my money.
Other information on it. Just from the note.
Eric's good with dealing with cats. Eric and the Department of Conservation would sort it out.
Eric has a solution.
Ding, 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 ding.
They had to take their tonsils out.
Forest and Bird?
No, because we didn't come.
He didn't come, but,
No, I don't need to know anything.
Right.
Forest and Bird submission.
And I'm just wondering, when do we start pulling down the flood bank so that the rivers can follow their natural course? There's quite a question about that. Goes against the thinking.
Was there any additional information that you might find out in relation to?
Well, just about the adaptation and mitigation on talked about. Probably question like that asked. There was too much adaptation, not enough mitigation. Too much short-term works as opposed to really long-term.
We were focusing on the processes rather than the outcome.
I had to bite my tongue.
Have we covered all of, so I've got a series of notes which I think might relate to the Federated Farmers submission. Was there anything in addition to the beginning conversation we had, Councillor Ward started, in relation to this particular submission?
They gave us some solutions, and it's quite good. They didn't say, we don't want this and don't like that. They gave us 2 solutions.
Is there any further information, mate? Anything else?
Well, I think we'll ask for the breakdown of the rates.
Process stuff in the shovel ready to extend that borrowing out.
That's it.
Well, when it comes to understanding some of the financial aspect of when we looked at the numbers 6 months ago, we had no certainty as to where we were going to finish at the end of June 2021, and there was a degree of, it's quite a lot of risk, and we sort of worked on a likely a reasonable loss for the current year, and that would drive us into negative to start with, and then we needed to pick that up with a higher rate increase. So are we going to see is it a projected or is it nearly the reality of where we're going to sit at the end of the current financial year as a starting point to put into our forecast for 21-22?
Probably by the end of next week, we'll be able to have a end of May figure, which might give us some ideas around where we're going to land. But I think it would be a bit premature to put.
So I'm hopeful that yes, we should be able to have an open balance, which is what you're asking for.
Yeah, I'm looking for an opening balance that's more up to date than 6 months ago.
Yes, I agree. I think that's very doable for next week.
Yeah, the submissions that haven't come in orally, there's one or two that have asked questions there. If there were anything there that you want to give staff direction on, I mean, you've got the helicopter trust wanting money. We've been down that track before and haven't. My view is we probably still won't, but if you wanted information, they would need to know. That's just one of the submissions that we haven't heard today. There's a number there that are hopeful of getting funding.
Just like to be mindful of Eric's point right at the start, that we did put a lot of work into this and it's been going on for some time. It wasn't a and just be careful of that messaging going out there and people saying they've put no thought into this, it's shabbily done, it's an F. We need to be mindful of that, how it's portrayed.
I think we're hearing you on that. So.
Not blaming you.
No.
Do we need to do anything today about that?
No. So we've got some additional bits of information we need to get together. Is there anything else we need at this stage, Wilma?
No, so we meet on Tuesday next week and have the deliberations for 2 days on the rest of the submissions. Will update this information, provide more information with an updated opening balance next week.
That's when the staff commentary will be updated.
And the staff commentary will become staff recommendations, deliberation.
Eric?
Just things that Peter and I made. You know, are we putting out a com statement today that we've had this? And there wasn't one particular theme. There were a variety of themes for us to pick up, which, and I think in that press statement, we can say that the diligent work we did over the 17 workshops actually has by and large been well received, and we're interested. We need to get that message out there somewhere.
Freely available on the website.
And freely available on the website if people want to check it.
I think
Just got to be careful in between deliberations, but it would be good to have
No, we're just reflecting on what happened today, and we weren't inundated with a whole lot of people saying.
On a couple of issues that was widespread.
There wasn't a general theme of criticism or you need to think here. And I think that message could go out in some form.
Acknowledging the submitters too and the work.
We'll get some advice on what we can do.
Thanking submitters for their work and.
I think it would be most appropriate for the chair to reflect on today's submissions. I think that would be fine.
Brilliant idea.
There's only one bunch of grizzlers who gave us an F, let's face it, everybody else is delighted, from my point of view. And we only need to worry about
people behind the name.
No, we've got to put that in the press release.
We're still in public at the moment, I think we might have to
Who
wrap
did they
up.
take photos of?
You, request for the case.
Are we comfortable with giving the staff the feedback we need for next week?
Yes. Thank you very much, staff.
Yeah, good work.
Thank you to the staff for the work running for a very long time and today, and for the contributions today. And I will declare the meeting closed.
We're starting at 9.